cold glint shined from Han Li's eyes, and he suddenly shook his hands, shooting a bolt of lightning towards the golden net. Countless arcs of lightning began to spark from the net upon impact, causing it to instantly constrict. Then, each of the black threads collided against the golden lightning. With a huge flash, the golden lightning turned the black threads of chi into ash, each burned thread accompanied by a wretched and tragic scream. Soon, the remaining black threads returned towards the center of the golden net, condensing into a glossy black demon nascent. Its face was filled to the brim with fear. It opened its mouth and spat out clouds and clouds pitch-black yin chi. They quickly wrapped around it in layers in an attempt to prevent the divine devil-bane lightning from approaching any closer to its body. Han Li's face was expressionless apart from the sneer that momentarily appeared. From his hand, he shot a bolt of lightning, so dazzling and bright it was difficult to see, and enveloped the demon nascent. Yet another miserable shriek soon followed, and the rolls of thunder quieted down, leaving only silence for a short while. When Han Li saw this, he inwardly sighed with relief before retracting his remaining lightning and taking a pitch-black storage pouch into his hand. He then raised his head and expressionlessly swept his gaze past the spell warriors up above. Then, with azure light shining from his body, he flew back down towards the heavenly south cultivators. After an exchange of a few brief words, Han Li exterminated his opponent with divine devil-bane lightning with unbelievable speed. Not only were the heavenly south cultivators dumbfounded, the Mulan spell warriors completely shaken with disbelief. While the heavenly south cultivators didn't know about the finer details of the black-robed figure, they had a general idea. These mysterious cultivators should have arrived at the Mulan Plains from a great continent. Although they didn't know why these cultivators suddenly appeared at the Mulan Plains, they reached some sort of agreement with the three divine sages of the Mulan tribes. And it was clear to see that these cultivators had abilities far beyond cultivators of a similar grade. Before the true war even started, two heavenly south nascent soul cultivators had perished one after another, earning the confidence of these two Mulan sages. As for why the black-robed figure participated in the second battle, it was because he felt that there were too many nascent soul stage cultivators that were guarding the grand formation, and he felt it best to first exterminate one while he could. But who could have known that this ordinary-appearing youth would actually be able to kill the black-robed figure with ease? Not even his nascent soul was able to escape, much to the shock of the two spell warriors. When the shriveled spell warrior and Ku Yao regained clarity of mind, he glanced at each other with terror and hesitated for a moment, not knowing whether or not they should continue the battle or deal with the uproar of the spell warriors behind them. But at that moment, they suddenly heard a faint, nearly inaudible voice speak in their ear. "Retreat for now. Our momentum has already died. Let us further consider our plans tomorrow. When that time comes, that formation may already be. He. While Heaven Weep's death will be inconvenient, I'll personally explain the matter to the divine sages." The voice sounded neutral in tone, but the words carried an unmistakable air of command. The shriveled man, the Ku Yao, were stunned for a moment upon hearing the voice, but they soon complied with their orders and began to give commands to the spell warriors under their command. With some disturbance, the army made an about-face and slowly retreated. The two sages naturally brought up the rear, gloomily watching the cultivators as they retreated. They glared at in particularly Han Li before flying off. Gu Xianpu watched the spell warrior army retreat and doubtfully asked, "Should we pursue them?" "Leave them be." The bald man shook his head and said, "Although they're retreating, they still haven't been defeated. If we were to pursue them, we could find ourselves surrounded. Also, we have to guard the grand formation. It'll be best if we nurtured our strength and bide our time. Our Yellow Dragon Mountain's thousand soundform formation isn't easily broken. If the Mulan wish to seize it, they will need to double their forces at the very least." After that was said, the bald man couldn't help but turn his eyes towards Han Li. Due to the surprise of Han Li managing to kill the black-robed cultivator, the cultivators found themselves in an awkward silence, all at a loss of what to say. As of current, Han Li was wearing a faint smile as he fiddled with a black storage pouch in his hands. Originally, Han Li's faint smiles hardly inspired any feelings in these cultivators. But after he managed to kill a nascent soul cultivator, Han Li's smile now gave them a profound and odd feeling, not to mention that their original contempt for him was now completely gone. The bald man smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Han, congratulations on slaying a high-grade spell warrior. I will be certain to inform the Nine Nations Alliance of your achievement. They will most definitely reward you greatly." Old Man Ma and Gu Xianpu also congratulated him with a smile. However, Han Li's expression still remained as subtle as before, despite the faint admiration and respect their tones held. As if ignoring this, Han Li simply exchanged a few courteous pleasantries with them as his gaze unconsciously wandered to one of them in particular. When nobody noticed this, he couldn't help but wear an indistinct smirk. Once the spell warrior army disappeared from sight, the bald man opened a passageway into the mist down below, and the party hastily disappeared from sight, the mist closing its entrance soon afterwards. Now, the surroundings of the Yellow Dragon Mountains grew peaceful once more. When Han Li and company returned to the hall, they had a quick discussion about the battles that occurred today before returning to their own residences to rest. Old Man Ma in particular not only had his treasure destroyed, but his vitality had greatly suffered as well. He was in dire need to rest and recover. Thus, in the blink of an eye, only the bald man remained in the hall. He sat in the main building and lowered his head, his mind lost in thought. A short moment later, he suddenly raised his eyebrow and a strange expression appeared on his face. He softly shouted, "Who is there? Come out." Then with a flash of light, another person appeared in the hall. He. Brother Lu's abilities are truly profound. Just as I entered, he was able to perceive me. It is not wonder why the Nine Nations Alliance had you guard the formation alone. The bald man frowned and wore a strange expression. Why aren't you resting? Why did you come back stealthily? It's nothing. I merely discovered a secret. I felt that I should have a discussion with you. The bald man glanced at him with an appraising look and puzzlingly asked, "Secret? What secret?" The drifting cloud sect's fellow Taoist Han is likely a spy for the Mulan. He spoke without the slightest hesitation and slowly walked inside. The bald man involuntarily laughed and his face was filled with disbelief. Spy? Could it be that your mind, if unclear? Fellow Taoist Han had just slain a nascent soul spell warrior today. The thought is ridiculous. I know that Brother Lu might not believe it, but I have evidence. You'll know that I'm speaking the truth. This person sighed and bitterly smiled before summoning a jade slip into his hand with a flash of light. He then stepped forward and neared the large man. The bald man wore an expression of astonishment and stood up to face him. He then calmly took the jade slip into his hand. At the same time the bald man took the jade slip into his hand, his expression vastly changed, and a fierce expression appeared in his eyes. In a flash of green light, the jade slip suddenly turned into a small emerald green snake. It bit the bald man's wrist with the speed of lightning. With an expression of shock, he couldn't even scream before he motionlessly collapsed onto the floor. His complexion turned a black violet. Joy flickered from the man's face and he muttered, "The twin-tailed jade serpent is truly as poisonous as its reputation. It is no less inferior than the 10 Supremes' poison. After the bite, it robs even a nascent soul the power to escape. If the snake was able to fly, it'd be an incredibly powerful method of killing other cultivators." He then took a step forward to examine the corpse that was slowly melting. The small dark green snake released its fangs from the corpse and slid away, revealing the 2 slim tails on its back. Its 2 tails struck the earth and then flung itself into the palm of its master. It coiled around itself and hissed with its purple-black tongue, its eyes glowing with an eerie dark green light. At that moment, this person lightly waved his hand and took the corpse's storage pouch into his hand. He then excitedly searched the storage pouch with his spiritual sense as if he were looking for something in particular. A short moment later, this person softly whispered, "It can't be. Where is the command medallion? I clearly saw him place it in the storage pouch." He then resentfully turned the bag upside down and tossed its belongings onto the ground, forming a pile of various inferior magic tools and a few low-grade spirit stones. Once the man clearly saw what was on the ground, his complexion turned deathly pale, and his body suddenly flashed with green light. Without another word, he shot towards the hall exit in a streak of light. A long sigh echoed through the hall. Soon, silver light flickered from every wall, enveloping them in waves of silver light and forming a huge barrier of light all around him. With a cold snort, the man continued without any intention of stopping. He slapped his waist and summoned a jet-black pangolin spirit beast, striking at the light that blocked his path. With a muffled bang, the spirit beast was repelled by the light barrier with the barrier completely unharmed. In the man's alarm, he suddenly gritted his teeth and spat out a blue trident from his mouth. In an instant, the magic treasure duplicated into 2 and combined together as a streak of large blue light before striking the light barrier. Then, with a muffled explosion, the blue light was reflected 10 meters back before spinning to the ground. "There is no need for Brother Gu to go through so much trouble." The bald man's voice echoed throughout the hall. As this place is the core of the grand formation of the Yellow Dragon Mountains, it is only natural for it to be guarded by the most powerful restrictions. Don't think that you'll be able to leave. Blue light faded away to reveal the controlling spirit sect's Gu Xiongpu. However, his complexion was deathly white and his gaze was brooding, barely able to keep his calm. So you didn't die, you used a flesh puppet. I had heard that there was a mysterious cultivator amongst the Nine Nations Union that was adept at refining flesh puppets identical to oneself, where one cannot even differentiate the true person from the puppet. I didn't actually expect this to be true. And in a flash of white light, the bald man revealed himself from within the hall. He glanced at Gu Xiongpu from outside the barrier, before turning his gaze to the ruined corpse on the floor. Brother Gu knows much about the affairs of our Nine Nations Union as expected, as well as the matter of doppelganger puppets. That's right, what you killed was a corpse puppet that I had controlled. Even a nascent soul cultivator such as yourself was unable to tell any difference from its exterior. Humph, rubbish. If I hadn't used my spiritual sense to closely examine your doppelganger out of fear of being detected, I definitely wouldn't have been deceived. Besides, even if I meticulously cultivated the twin-tailed jade serpent for several hundreds of years, its incredibly vicious poison definitely shouldn't have been capable of killing a nascent soul cultivator alone. I originally planned only to use the serpent to heavily injure you, but I had mistakenly overestimated the toxicity of the snake upon seeing you perish in a single blow. It seems I've become arrogant. Gu Xiongpu spoke with an icy expression, but a trace of regret was betrayed from his eyes. The bald man emotionlessly said, "He. I had requested a puppet to be refined for me out of a moment's fancy. I didn't truly think that a dead corpse would actually be refined to my likeness. However, spending this corpse puppet to discover that Brother Gu was a traitor was well worth the spirit stones the puppet had cost." Gu Xiongpu's cheek twitched and grew silent for a spell, but a short moment later, he icily said, "From your tone, you seem to know that I would come find you and you had already prepared a substitute ahead of time. Could it be that you've discovered something amiss after I arrived at the Yellow Dragon Mountains?" The bald man shook his head. "Of course not. How could I suspect an elder of the controlling spirit sect without cause or reason? I was merely given a warning from someone else. I originally felt unsure of the matter, but now it has been made certain." He then turned his head to the sides of the hall and shouted, "Fellow Taoist Han, Brother Ma, you may come out." When Gu Xiongpu heard this, he was no longer able to maintain his gloomy expression. Alarm was betrayed from his face. Then in a flash of yellow light from both sides of the hall, a calm Han Li and a grave old man Ma walked out. With a pained expression, the old man sorrowfully said, "I didn't expect that fellow Taoist Gu would actually do this. What kind of benefits did the Mulan offer you to do such a deranged thing?" Gu Xiongpu stared at the old man and coldly snorted. "Deranged? I was originally from the Mulan tribes. How could my decision possibly be deranged?" "You're a person from the Mulan." The party of cultivators couldn't help but reveal surprise. "Of course." A maddened expression appeared on Gu Xiongpu's face. "Did you believe that benefits were enough to rope in a nascent soul cultivator like me? You Heavenly South cultivators should realize how sparse cultivation resources are in the Mulan Plains. There are countless talented low-grade spell warriors that never progress in their cultivation due to a lack of spirit stones and medicine pills, and they turn to a pile of bones after only 100 years because they lack the optimal circumstances for cultivation. Why is that you Heavenly South cultivators were able to take such a good area, and us spell warriors must make do with a sparse few spirit stones to use? So long as the Mulan acquire the cultivation resources of the Heavenly South, in less than 100 years the number of spell warriors will double. With such vast strength, we'll be able to defeat the soaring tribe's immortals and rule over the entirety of the Mulan Plains." When Gu Xiongpu said that, the others couldn't help but glance at each other in dismay. Han Li expressionly asked, "Defeat the soaring tribe's immortals?" It seems the Mulan had suffered a decisive defeat by these immortals, and now a majority of the Mulan Plains are being held by these towards immortal masters. Is that why you've staked it all in order to invade the Heavenly South? How do you know of this?" Gu Xiongpu was stunned for a moment before suddenly something came to his mind and he viciously glared at Han Li. "You eavesdropped on my sound transmissions with Sagela." Han Li expressionlessly said, "It seems Brother Gu had realized it quite quickly, but don't blame me. Who was it that told you to so brazenly sound transmissions in front of me? With my slightly superior spiritual sense, I was just able to listen to your voice transmissions and informed fellow Taoist Lu of the matter." With a pale complexion, Gu Xiaopu rigidly stared at Han Li and resentfully said, "Good, very good. All of my secrets are leaked. I've been concealed in the heavenly south for so long, yet it can't be anything but unjust to fall to such a careless mistake. But to say that your spiritual sense is only slightly superior. Humph, your esteemed self is far too modest. How could our secret voice transmission technique compare to common sound transmission? Unless your spiritual sense is as strong as a late nascent soul cultivator, there was no other way you could have eavesdropped on my conversation." Old Man Ma shouted in alarm, "Late nascent soul stage." The bald man was also alarmed and glanced at Han Li with amazement. Han Li frowned. He didn't think that this matter would unintentionally reveal the strength of his spiritual sense. But soon, he eased his brow and instead wore a relaxed expression, leaving the bald man and Old Man Ma feeling skeptical of Gu Xiaopu's words. After all, it was a bit too outrageous for an early nascent soul cultivator to have a spiritual sense on the level of a late nascent soul cultivator. The bald man reluctantly turned his gaze away from Han Li and icily gazed at Gu Xiaopu inside the light barrier. "Since we now know you are a spy, don't blame us for being ruthless. Although I wish to spare your life and hand you over to the enforcers of the Union, there is a great battle ahead of us. We do not have the option to keep you alive." Soon after, he flipped his hand and summoned a command medallion that flickered with silver light. He raised the command medallion into the air, shooting a beam of light at the barrier. The barrier cleanly absorbed the beam and began to flicker, suddenly shining with countless silver flowers, each vastly beautiful. Gu Xiaopu saw the silver flowers just like a poisonous insect, and his expression grew unsightly. Without further thought, he quickly slapped several places around his body, placing several layers of various colored light around his body. At that same time, he pointed to the blue trident in front of it. It began to spin above his head and formed a barrier of blue light around him. Once the silver flowers began to rupture and fill the light barrier, the bald man turned around with disinterest and solemnly spoke to Han Li and Old Man Ma. "Let's go, there's nothing good to see. Although his cultivation is high, he won't be able to endure the restrictions for long and will soon have his soul destroyed. We still have to deal with the aftermath. Although this person was a Mulan spy, he was still a controlling spirit sect elder. We will have much explaining to do to the Union." Seeing that the large man possessed such confidence in the hall's restrictions, Han Li blinked but said nothing else. Old Man Ma also felt somewhat doubtful of the bald man's words and frowned. Han Li smiled and suddenly said, "To tell the truth, although this matter is somewhat troublesome, there is no need to worry too much over it." Not daring to ignore Han Li given his previous accomplishments, the bald man hesitantly asked, "What does Brother Han mean?" Old Man Ma also looked at Han Li with astonishment. Han Li rubbed his chin and said, "Our alliance leaders should surely know something of the Mulan spies infiltrating into the heavenly south. They must have caught some in the past. So as long as this high-grade cultivator was a spy, the controlling spirit sect won't be able to do much about it. Since we all come from different alliances, most cultivators won't think that we had deliberately framed the controlling spirit sect elder. As such, we only have to explain ourselves and deliver the information we acquired from the Mulan. Once they've verified this information, no trouble should come of this. I believe the controlling spirit sect should have had their own misgivings about Elder Gu by now. Surely fellow Taoist Gu wasn't able to perfectly conceal everything after so many years. And even if they don't, they should be able to find something suspicious from his past movements." The bald man unfurled his brow and suddenly revealed a white jade slip in his hand. He wore an odd expression and said, "Brother Han's words are reasonable. I had also used a secret technique to record his previous words in a jade slip as well. We'll be able to use it as evidence when the time comes." After hearing Han Li's explanation and seeing the bald man's jade slip, Old Man Ma breathed a sigh of relief. "That will do. It is a pity that fellow Taoist Bu wasn't able to come out and stand witness, as his injuries were so severe that he had to conceal himself, but it won't pose a problem." Once that was said, the three had a more detailed discussion about the matter when hisses suddenly sounded out from the silver light barrier. The three were greatly surprised by this, and they glanced at each other with bewilderment. Just as the bald man thought to take action, a huge explosion of flames ruptured from within the barrier. A green claw flew out and struck the light barrier like a bolt of lightning, causing it to fiercely tremble. "What's this? He still has the strength to shock the restriction." The bald man was greatly alarmed and shouted with disbelief. He then formed an incantation gesture and struck the barrier with a white spell seal, causing the numerous flowers of light to cease, revealing the scene inside. The bald man and old man Ma felt their breaths turn cold. Han Li's expression was also sullen. Gu Xiumpu had disappeared, only to be replaced with a half-man, half-demon serpent monster. This monstrosity was wearing Gu Xiumpu's clothes, but its face and limb was entirely covered by green scales. Its 2 eyes were icily eerie, and its 10 fingers were razor-sharp. It also had 2-meter-long tails that were gently tapping the floor. The scaly face had clearly belonged to Gu Xiumpu. When it opened its mouth, its serpent tongue flickered and it uttered serpent hisses, much to the disgust and fear of those present. When Old Man Ma clearly saw the monster's appearance, his face turned deathly pale, and he flusteredly shouted, "This is the spirit fuse technique." He had turned into one with the twin-tailed Jade serpent. When the bald man heard the old man, he also wore an expression of furious alarm. Spirit fuse technique. Isn't that a lost secret technique? Does he not fear being banished from the cycle of reincarnation? Soon after, he rigidly stared at the serpentine monster as if it were a great enemy and hastily slapped his storage pouch. In a flash of silver light, the restriction command talisman appeared in his hand. The large man puffed a breath of spirit chi on the medallion before tossing it into the air. But just as he began to hurriedly utter an incantation, the monster inside the barrier began to take action. It sullenly swept its gaze past the 3 outside the barrier, and quickly flicked its tongue before splitting open its cheek and spitting out a purple-black liquid towards the 3. At that moment, the bald man saw this and ceased his incantation, pointing towards the command medallion instead. The medallion began to radiate with silver light and shot over 10 silver spell seals at the barrier, each absorbed seal releasing a dragon's cry. The barrier then flashed violently several times and grew thicker, and the countless silver flow within the barriers then began to condense at the top. When the black-purple liquid struck the barrier, a small portion of the light barrier instantly turned black, and soon the color spread to nearly an area of 3 meters. A malicious expression appeared on the serpent monster's face. At that same moment, its 2 tails struck at the floor, launching it forward in a streak of green light and fiercely striking at the barrier with its claws. With a bang, a large hole was torn through the hardy barrier as if it were paper. The monster was delighted by the sight of this, and its body blurred as it attempted to escape. When the bald man saw this, he wore an expression of horror and spat out a white rod from his mouth, forming a curtain of light around his body. Old Man Ma had also done the same. With a nervous expression, he spat out his ruler magic treasure and covered his body in a layer of light. The 2 clearly understood how fearsome was an early nascent soul cultivator that used the spirit fuse technique. Let alone its techniques, its cultivation should be on par with a mid-nascent soul cultivator. When the 2 saw the monster was about to escape, they naturally planned to fight it through a battle of attrition. They wouldn't take the initiative to strike until it struck first. But at that moment, Han Li sighed with a helpless tone and decided to take action. With a faint blur, he closed the short distance and appeared in front of the tier in the barrier. When the serpentine monster was just about to escape and saw Han Li blocking its way, a malicious gaze flickered from its eyes. Without a single trace or warning, it opened its mouth and spat out purple-black venom. "Be careful, fellow Taoist Han, quickly dodge." The bald man and old man Ma both shouted in alarm. It wasn't because of any concern from familiarity, but that they needed all the strength they could muster to fight against this monster, not to mention the looming threat of the Spell Warrior's army. Seemingly ignoring the 2's shouts of alarm, Han Li stared at the oncoming purple-black liquid, and an odd expression flickered from his eyes. With a deliberate raise of his arm, he bent his fingers, covering them in a layer of flickering blue flames, and stretched his hand forward to grab the poison. The 2 other nascent soul cultivators felt their heart drop at the sight of this. As for the serpentine monster, it spat out another blob of poison without any hesitation. A nearly indistinct sneer appeared on Han Li's face and blue light shined from his eyes. An eruption of light suddenly appeared between Han Li and the monster. The brilliant light wildly flickered several times before quickly dimming. The bald man and old man Ma hastily blinked and glanced over. What they saw left them in shock. They simply saw the serpentine monster wear an expression of rapt delight just as it was about to escape the light barrier, but its body was now covered in sparkling crystal, turning into a blue ice sculpture. As for the venom, it had turned into a slim thread of ice that emerged from its mouth, spanning about a meter long. At an unknown time, Han Li had appeared behind the monster and had placed his blue flaming hand on the back of the monster's neck. Han Li took his hand off of its neck and stared at the ice sculpture. As expected, This is the first time the spirit-fused monster has come to life. Although it was quite intelligent, its experience was far too shallow. There was nothing to be afraid of. He then raised his other hand, and a dense arc of golden lightning shot out from his palm and struck the ice sculpture, swapping a slim net of golden lightning around it. The blue radiance and the golden light fused together before promptly exploding, turning the ice sculpture into inch-sized chunks. With blue specks of light filling the air, a fist-sized black-purple object had shot out, but it was caught by the golden net. Inhuman wails soon began to scream from it. A stern expression flickered from Han Li's face. Han Li closed the hand that emitted the lightning and caused the net to constrict, rupturing it into golden brilliance and causing it to disappear from view. With a screech, the golden radiance turned the demon nascent into a cloud of smoke that soon scattered. It was said that the spirit-fused technique was an incredibly vicious ancient devil Dao technique. Of course, the demon nascent that resulted from it was likewise incredibly vulnerable to the divine devil-bane lightning, and was quickly destroyed, incapable of using instant movement to escape. In the distance, the bald man had dropped his jaw and couldn't muster the force to open his mouth. As for Old Man Ma, his face appeared calm enough, but his eyes were wide open and he couldn't bring himself to say anything. Han Li had already anticipated that the two would feel shocked, and he maintained his calm appearance. He summoned the storage pouch on the floor and the blue trident into his hands, and then observed them with his spiritual sense before tossing them to the bald man. Han Li glanced at the two and slowly said, "Although we did kill him, we should give his magic treasure and storage pouch back to the controlling spirit sect in an untouched stage. That way, the controlling spirit sect won't have anything to say." When the bald man heard Han Li speak, he instantly recovered from his shock and immediately agreed. "Brother Han's words are very reasonable. We'll do as you suggested." Old Man Ma's mouth moved several times, but no words were able to come out. Rather, he put away his ruler magic treasure with an embarrassed expression. Han Li's killing the black-robed man could be attributed to carelessness and luck. But this time, he managed to empty-handedly kill the spirit-fused monster that possessed cultivation on par with a mid-nascent soul cultivator, an opponent that was beyond their capabilities. Without any prior discussion, they both felt that the Drifting Cloud Sect's Elder Han could possibly have the abilities to deal with any opponent under late nascent soul stage. When this thought came to their mind, the two were unable to keep a calm appearance. Han Li indifferently said, "Since the matter has been resolved, I will be going back to take a rest. If the spell warriors return, please call for me." "Brother Han, go ahead. We will naturally oversee this area." The bald man's words unconsciously carried a tone of respect. Han Li smiled and waved his arm before leaving the hall. The previous display of celestial ice flames and divine devil-bane lightning was a forced measure. If he hadn't taken the initiative to attack, the serpentine monster would have escaped and caused no end of problems for the future. The bald man and the old man Ma would have found it difficult to bar the monster's way. Moreover, he didn't feel the need to conceal his true abilities once he condensed a nascent soul. His current circumstances were much different than when he was in the scattered star seas. He had to keep himself hidden at the time because his cultivation was meager, and he was in an unfamiliar area. If the wrong people noticed him, he would be hunted down. But now that he condensed a nascent soul, he now walked in the upper echelon of the cultivation world, and since there were only a sparse few that would pose much threat to him, he didn't feel much apprehension about revealing himself. Moreover, given the current invasion of the Mulan, it would be impossible to continue hiding his abilities. At the very least, the Ghost Spirit Sect and Marquis Nanlong's party should know of his true abilities from what he had displayed at their treasure hunt in the Mulan Plains. As such, he may as well reveal his true strength so he could intimidate any small fry that plotted against him. Otherwise, if any fellow cultivators believed him to be weak, it would provoke some needless problems. Of course, Han Li wouldn't easily reveal all of his killing moves. As Han Li pondered this, he also recalled the strange feeling from the purple apex flames when he enveloped the demon nascent. Just a moment ago, he had used the purple apex flames together with the celestial ice flames in order to freeze the monster in an instant. Then when he recalled the purple apex flames, he felt it become somewhat unstable. It seemed using the full might of these flames required a certain level of higher cultivation, as he had expected. With a feeling of self-mockery, Han Li slowly walked towards his residence. When Old Man Ma saw Han Li leave, he wryly smiled and said, "Brother Lu, it seems we've made a misjudgment. Fellow Taoist Han's abilities are miraculously profound. His strength is far beyond ours." A trace of admiration appeared on the bald man's face. That's right. Although his cultivation is at early nascent soul stage, with that golden lightning and blue flames, he could beat back even mid-nascent soul stage cultivators. Old Man Ma smiled and said, "However, this matter turned out for the better for us. With such a powerful ally, we will have nothing to fear from the invading spell warriors." "That makes sense." The bald man nodded, but soon he frowned and said, "However, while I haven't heard of this blue flame before, I've faintly heard of golden lightning before, but I can't recall what it is. Does Brother Ma have an idea?" The old man pondered for a moment and felt a faint chill. "None. This was also the first time I've ever seen golden lightning. This technique is so incisive, even a nearly incorporeal nascent soul was unable to escape it. Let's leave it be. Regardless of what great abilities fellow Taoist Han cultivate, it is a fortunate matter for us." The bald man frowned as if unwilling to speak further of the matter and said, "We still must talk about the matters for tomorrow." Old Man Ma was stunned and bafflingly asked, "What do you mean by tomorrow's matters?" A cold glint appeared in the bald man's eyes, and he sinisterly said, "Since the Mulan set off a spy to break the formation, why don't we beat them at their own game?" Something immediately came to Old Man Ma's mind. "Brother Lu, you mean?" "It's quite simple, Old Man Ma and the old man suddenly spoke in a whisper, their voices faintly echoing throughout the hall. A short moment later, the bald man wildly laughed as if rejoicing at the brilliance of his own plan. On noon of the second day, just as the burning sun rose to the center of the sky, the beats of rumbling war drums traveled through the air. The spell warrior army gradually made their way from across the horizon, this time bringing along a huge monster at the center of their ranks. From a single glance, it seemed to be a huge rhino that was enlarged by several tens of times. At the top of its nose was a lustrous blue horn that was over 3 meters long. The beast's extremely huge body was covered in a layer of glowing black battle armor that had talisman characters floating above it. It appeared extremely precious. Not to mention its huge size, its 4 feet seemed to be treading entirely on blue clouds in an extremely nimble display. It didn't appear clumsy in the slightest. In addition, there was a woman sitting on the beast, a beauty in her prime, her feet bare and her appearance delicate, but there was an hostile aura faintly emitted from her eyes as her cold gaze wandered around. She wore simple and short dark green robes. Ku Yao and the shriveled spell warrior were closely following at the side of the huge beast, as if paying respect to the woman. Before they grew close to the yellow dragon mountains, the green-clothed woman yelped in astonishment. Ku Yao couldn't help but ask, "What? Has Master Li discovered something?" An odd expression appeared on her expression and she slowly said, "Yes, there is something strange." "Could there be a change in plans? Has that person failed?" The shriveled spell warrior grew still and worry appeared on his face. "No necessarily. You two should go and take a look," the woman indifferently said. Soon after, she closed her eyes and remained silent. The shriveled spell warrior and Ku Yao looked at other and bafflingly spread their spiritual sense forward. Soon, the two wore astonished expressions. With great amazement, Ku Yao bafflingly said, "What's going on? The mist has already scattered. Didn't we discuss that the restriction was supposed to break halfway through the attack so that we can exterminate all the cultivators? What happened for the restriction to suddenly disappear?" The shriveled spell warrior hesitantly said, "I don't know. First, let's advance and take a proper look before we decide what to do." With that discussed, the woman on the huge beast remained silent. As a result, the spell warrior army continued forward. However, the warnings of the shriveled spell warrior made sure that their army was especially vigilant. Nothing out of the ordinary occurred when the spell warrior army finished making their way over the short distance to where they were yesterday. The endless sea of dark green mist no longer existed, only to reveal the mountains and their various jade platforms on each mountaintop. However, the fine and exquisite structures were now ruined and scorched black, with a few of them releasing smoke. With the addition of the silence looming over the mountain range and the lack of any other people, it made for a miserable sight. The spell warrior army split into two as the green-robed woman slowly moved her beast forward. They glanced at the beautiful figure on the huge beast with respect and kept silence rather than show their ordinary display of restlessness. Ku Yao and the shriveled spell warrior followed after her. The woman glanced at the scene before her with bright wandering eyes. After a moment of silence, she brushed her hair back and a cold smile appeared on her face. The shriveled spell warrior bewilderedly said, "It's no good. Although the mist has stopped, there are still restrictions present that are blocking my spiritual sense from looking any further. Ku Yao puzzlingly said, "That's right. What we're seeing currently is possibly only an illusion. If that person has truly succeeded, he should have joined us by now." With a cold voice, the woman said, "Then you mean to say that we will simply stand here and do nothing?" "Of course not," the shriveled spell warrior explained. "We will only need to be more careful. It is possible that person had only succeeded in part and had escaped after being detached. As a result, the other cultivators must have abandoned this place and made a retreat." The green-robed woman smiled with indifference. "Such a wild guess is pointless. Considering the enemy's cultivation, we have a very high certainty of victory. However, we cannot be careless. A miscalculation could lead to death or capture." Ku Yao hesitantly said, "Then Sage means." The woman calmly said, "Regardless of whether or not this is a trap, we've come to break the formation. Let's move in accordance to our original location. It will be worth it to sacrifice a few men to gain an understanding of the true situation, as our most crucial resource is time. We've acquired information that the other powers of the Heavenly South are jointly sending reinforcements. It will take 2 to 3 months for them to arrive. We must charge our main forces towards Soaring Heaven City for the best opportunity to capture the city. If we allow the 9 Nations Union and the other powers to first join together, we will lose far too much strength even if we won the battle against them. Then let us do as Sagela proposes." The shriveled spell warrior hesitated before agreeing. As for Ku Yao, he didn't particularly care about the lives of the lower-grade spell warriors and offered no objections. The woman nodded and her lips moved, sending a voice transmission to an unknown party. Then, nearly 100 similarly dressed spell warriors slowly advanced towards the top of the Yellow Dragon Mountains under the lead of a core formation spell warrior. Nearly 100 spell warriors gradually turned to black dots as they made their way through where the Sea of Mist originally existed towards the mountain. Their journey was unhindered as the 100 spell warriors arrived at the mountaintop without problem, much to the shriveled spell warrior's relief. With a smile, he said to the green-robed woman, "It seems this area has truly been abandoned. Let us have the others start a search. Since they were in such a hurry, they must have left much behind." The woman coldly said, "Do not be hasty. Continue the search." The shriveled spell warrior was startled upon hearing this and said nothing else. At that moment, the 100 spell warriors have begun to search through a jade platform as well as a half-burned building, occasionally finding a few spirit stones and other materials. These spell warriors were beaming as they bluntly took these items as their own and placed them into each of their storage pouches. The spell warrior army was originally comprised of different, various-sized Mulan tribes to begin with. Apart from the resources acquired from spirit stone mines and such, the rest of the spoils in the war were each their own. When the main force outside saw this, they began to grow restless. They were extremely envious of the opportunity to acquire spoils without life-threatening battles or any hardship. Who knew how many good items were held in the buildings there? Not long after, the shriveled man and Ku Yao were no longer able to keep still. Ku Yao hesitantly said, "Sagela, look." Since a majority of the army's spell warriors came from their tribes, they naturally didn't wish for the spell warriors from their own tribes to miss this opportunity as they were always lacking cultivation materials. As for the 100 spell warriors already looting, they came from a small tribe that wasn't particularly powerful. What they already gathered should be enough for them. The green-robed woman remained indifferent as if she hadn't heard them. Instead, she unconsciously narrowed her eyes as if puzzled about something. When Ku Yao and the shriveled spell warrior saw this, they hesitantly glanced at each other and ceased talking. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, the 100 spell warriors had scavenged about a third of the mountain peak. At that moment, the woman finally said, "The 2 of you will each send 100 men into the area and destroy the remaining restrictions in passing. There is no need to sweep the entire mountain with your spiritual sense. I won't be allowing any others to enter the mountain." "Yes, we will do as Sagela commands." Delighted, the 2 sent words to their own personal disciples in their respective tribes. As a result, 200 more spell warriors entered the mountaintop and began to rummage through the buildings like ravenous wolves. "With this much people, my magic power will not be able to hold." Old Man Ma's voice suddenly broke the silence in some area of the Yellow Dragon Mountains. The bald man sighed with regret and said, "It is truly a pity that none of the Mulan Grand Sages entered the trap." No long after that was said, a quake began to shake the entire mountaintop. The 300 spell warriors currently present were completely shocked. Without the slightest orders, they scattered in every direction. As for the three core formation cultivators that were leading each party, they were naturally the fastest, traveling 100 meters in the blink of an eye. But even if they were capable of mustering further speed, they wouldn't be able to escape the vast perimeter of the formation. Lights of all colors suddenly shined from the mountaintop, and the green mist began to return, instantly surging through the air, enveloping a vast area around the mountain in a sea of green mist once more with the yellow Dragon Mountains as its center. When the shriveled spell warrior and Ku Yao saw this, their expression became unsightly and even a bit pale. As for the green-robed woman riding the huge beast, her gaze remained cold as always as well as her expression. "What a pity," she said with an emotionless tone. "It was a trap as expected. If we didn't have Gu Xiongpu take action, perhaps he could have remained hidden and displayed an even greater effect." Ku Yao formed a fist with both his hands and stared into the mist. The core formation spell warrior that he sent inside was a direct descendant that he particularly favored. Not thinking that he would fall into a trap, he anxiously felt the need to rescue him. With eyes lit aflame, he said, "Sagela, those inside." The green-robed woman glanced at Ku Yao and carelessly said, "Don't waste your breath. With those nascent soul cultivators' abilities, dealing with the core formation cultivators will be very easy. They are likely already dead." After his expression wavered, he wore a fierce expression and said, "If that's the case, Sagela, have me lead the charge to break the formation. I'm able to release my fire spirit's essence and destroy the formation in a single breath. Afterwards, let us incinerate the remains of each of the cultivators inside." The woman raised her brow and said, "Your fire spirit's essence? That's fine. Since you've already made up your mind, I will have the giant rhino accompany you. However, it is best that you save your fire spirit's essence and use it during a crucial moment. We must also pay particular attention to that youth that killed Sir Heavenweep. I suspect he is also the cultivator that destroyed the body of the Heavenly Wind Tribe's Sage Mew. If that's the case, his abilities are great, not to mention his strange blue flames. If you aren't careful, you'll meet your end." The shriveled cultivator's expression stirred and he revealed a trace of fear. "He's the cultivator that slayed Sage Mew's physical body. I heard that he was capable of the legendary lightning movement. Is that true?" "Sage Wen, your techniques are weakest against cultivators that are able to close the distance in combat. Take particular care of yourself to never fight with this cultivator. It'd be best if you left him to me." With a cold glint shining from her eyes, she proudly said, "I cultivate the soft wind arts. Its speed should be no less than his lightning movement. Despite how deadly his devil flames and golden lightning may be, if they do not land on me, they cannot cause me harm. As for his other abilities, he is still only an early nascent soul cultivator. How can he hope to compete with me?" "That is fine. Only Sagela will be able to handle him. Against the sage that was able to rival Saintess Tianlin of the Soaring Tribe, he will certainly be outmatched." The shriveled cultivator sighed with relief at the confidence that the green-robed woman displayed. When she heard this, she immediately grew sullen and coldly snorted, "Saintess Tianlin." The shriveled cultivator was alarmed by this. He suddenly recalled that Sagela considered the battle her defeat and loathed when others mentioned the matter. "This, really," the shriveled cultivator muttered in an attempt to change the subject, but the woman waved her arm and restored her calm. "Enough, we must break the formation, cease other talks and order the start of the assault." "Yes," to the shriveled cultivator's relief, he instantly objected alongside Ku Yao. In the dark mist, the corpse of a core formation spell warrior laid headless. Not far away, a figure flashed with azure light. Han Li glanced at the headless corpse before raising his hand and recalled the streak of blue light from the corpse before flying off. As Han Li calmly flew forward, he examined the spell warrior's storage pouch only to reveal disappointment. The storage pouch only possessed junk, nothing of relating to spirit techniques or anything else of value. Han Li frowned before releasing a long sigh. At that moment, loud war drums were beating outside the sea of green mist. Several waves of astonishing spiritual chi fluctuated from the direction of where the drums were beating. Afterwards, a low thunderous howl shook the air and earth, causing even the mist to faintly roil. Han Li's expression remained calm as he coldly swept his gaze around and raised his head to look above. After wearing a pensive expression for a moment, he sneered and released a scarlet-red fireball in his hand, turning the corpse nearby into ash. He then turned around and flew towards the center of the mist, disappearing without a trace. At the center of the mist, there was a strange occurrence. All the damaged buildings had returned to becoming completely intact, with cultivators occasionally scattering to various portions of the mist. Old Man Ma and the bald man were floating about 100 meters above the buildings. They were standing at each other's side as they all gazed in the direction of the spell warrior army, their expressions grave. The bald man sighed. I didn't think the Mulan would be so careful. Although we killed a few of their spell warriors, we didn't do much to harm their strength. We now can only use force against force. Brother Ma, how is your magic power holding up? You used the concealing heaven flags to cover half of the mountaintop. Old Man Ma twirled his beard and casually said, with the magic power I have left, I won't be able to defeat the enemy, but I should have no problem distracting a Mulan sage. The bald man solemnly said, that's fine. Leave the rest of the enemies for me and fellow Taoist Han to deal with. Fellow Taoist Bu has also restored a bit of his strength. I've already instructed his subordinates to call for him if the situation turns dire. Old Man Ma used his spiritual sense to view the tremendous beast outside of the formation and wore a worried expression. That is also fine. However, I fear that huge beast will be troublesome to deal with. We cannot afford to be distracted, and I suspect our core formation cultivators will not be able to deal with it. Bald Man sighed. There is nothing we can do about the matter. We are truly lacking people, but with the Murong brothers watching over the formation, they will be able to provide further assistance. As core formation cultivators that cultivate lightning techniques, they're considerably hard to kill and should prove somewhat effective even against the beast's rough hide. His tone lacked confidence, having heard of the beast's fearsomeness from a few of the defeated cultivators. Old Man Ma nodded with a worried appearance. That is all we'll be able to do in advance. At that moment, azure light flashed from the green mist and flew around the two. The light faded away to reveal Han Li. He smiled at the two and asked, fellow Taoists, it seems the Mulan are about to attack. Do you have any good plans to withstand them? The bald man smiled. It is good that Brother Han has come. We were just discussing this. Preparations. He repeated his previous plan to Han Li. Han Li frowned for a moment before relaxing his brow. That gigantic beast will be troublesome. This strange breed should have only existed during ancient times. Just how did the Mulan acquire them? Anyhow, let us do as fellow Taoist Lu says. The bald man chuckled and respectfully said, for this coming battle, we will be relying much on Brother Han's abilities. Han Li stroked his nose and calmly said, since this matter concerns the safety of the entire heavenly south, I naturally must strive my hardest. However, the enemy forces are truly powerful. My spirit may be willing, but my body might be too weak. Old Man Ma smiled and respectfully said, if even Brother Han cannot match them, let alone us, the same could be said about the others in the alliance. Han Li glanced at Old Man Ma and mysteriously smiled. Brother Ma truly overestimates me. My abilities aren't nearly as great as you two think they are. Please don't set your expectations too highly. Wishing also to deepen his friendship, the bald man chuckled and said, regardless of how it is said, Brother Han is by no means a common early nascent soul cultivator. Your abilities are far beyond ours. For this coming battle, ye, the Mulan, have begun their assault. He quickly turned his gaze towards the instant. Han Li and Old Man Ma quickly glanced around in alarm. Red lights suddenly glowed in the direction of the spell warrior's army. A cloud of red flame suddenly filled the sky with several tens of scorching miniature suns gathering within it. Being the first time he had seen such a thing, Old Man Ma shouted in alarm, what's this? The bald man sullenly explained, this is a spell warrior spirit technique formation. With a large number of spell warriors taking the place of formation flags and plates, they are able to quickly form a spell formation spirit technique. However, a high-grade spell warrior is needed to oversee the formation. From the huge fireballs, it is likely being controlled by the fire attribute spell warrior from yesterday. Spirit technique formation. Old Man Ma muttered to himself in astonishment. Although he wished to further ask about the details, he knew now was not the appropriate time and kept silent. Han Li withdrew his gaze and calmly said, let us all enter the formation and act with discretion. Before we fight with the nascent soul stage spell warriors, let us kill as many low-grade spell warriors as possible. Good, neither of the two offered any objections. The bald man called for several of the other core formation cultivators and gave them each their instructions, all of them entering the green mist one after another, with Yingning among them. Of course, Han Li gave her a few words of warning via voice transmission before promptly disappearing from the mist. At that moment, a portion of the spell warriors were organized into groups of several tens, each of them arranged in a profound and wondrous spell formation. They all raised a sparkling fire-red magic tool over their heads as they gathered around the fire chi and conducted the formation. Several tens of huge fireballs floated hundreds of meters above them as they surged with broiling heat. The spell warriors underneath were roasting, each of their mouths parched, their vision blurry, their bodies trembling as they bitterly supported the spirit technique formation. At the very center of the formation of tens of fireballs, Ku Yao was sitting cross-legged with disheveled hair as 6 huge red banners slowly revolved around him. He remained completely motionless while his hands formed a strange incantation gesture. As for the 3-meter-long fire python, it spiraled around his head while its body shined with brilliant red light, stirring clouds of fire around it. Not far away, the green-robed woman had dismounted from the huge beast and was coldly staring at Ku Yao's actions. As for the shriveled spell warrior, he was further behind them and was glancing at them with concern. Ku Yao suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, "Go!" The 6 banners around him simultaneously erupted into pillars of scarlet light. At that same moment, 6 fireballs that spanned over 40 meters in length appeared in the air. Suddenly, the pillars of scarlet light were completely absorbed by the 6 fireballs, and they began to tremble for a moment before spurting out flames that were 3 meters tall. Then, as the war drums continued to beat, the fireballs shot towards the sea of green mist like huge meteors in a single line, as if wishing to forcefully open a passage through the mist. The combined casting of these many spell warriors had condensed fireballs of extraordinary might. As meticulously placed as the green mist grand formation may have been by the 9 Nations Union formation experts, these meteors of flame caused an earth-shattering explosion as soon as they touched the green mist. With several successive bursts of 100-meter-tall flames accompanying each explosion, the green mist was scattered by the wild flaming winds that soon followed, wiping them entirely away in an instant. Although green and yellow formation lights still shined, they were clearly outmatched and weren't able to withstand the assault in the slightest. In the blink of an eye, 6 huge areas were completely devoid of mist from within the formation. A cold glint flickered from the green-robed woman's eyes and she flipped her hand, summoning a golden circle in her hand. She then raised it in the air, and it flew down to the giant rhino, which was already positioned at the edge of the sea of green mist. With a loud ring, the golden circle fell onto the blue horn of the giant rhino and tightened in an instant. The huge horn was then sheathed and began to sparkle with dazzling light. Perhaps spurred by the blinding golden light or some action by the green-robed woman, the giant rhino's eyes quickly turned blood red and it released thunderous roars. As it treaded on the blue clouds underneath it, it wildly rushed down towards the green mist. A short moment later, the beast's roars filled the air as yellow and green light brightly glowed. "Let's go in. Said Ku Yao will continue to use fire spirit techniques and destroy the restrictions. We will bring this formation down." The green-robed woman's clear voice spread throughout the sky. The spell warriors on standby cheered upon receiving their orders, and they began to enter the green mist while in groups ranging from 5 to 10. The green-robed woman indifferently said, "Let's also head in. Once Sage Ku Yao finishes casting the technique, he will follow after us." She then glowed with white light and flew down in a streak of light. The shriveled spell warrior hastily agreed before following after her in a trail of black light. A short moment later, there were only several hundred spell warriors that had yet to enter the restriction. At that moment, the remaining fireballs were being absorbed by the 6 banner of flames surrounding Ku Yao. They then fell onto the sea of mist in an arrangement of lines at the same location as the previous 6 meteors, causing several tens of pillars of flames to erupt, nearly breaking apart the entirety of the restriction. With wild roars of laughter, Ku Yao suddenly stood up and waved to the spell warriors around him. Then he wordlessly flew down towards the mist of sea in a ball of scorching flame. When the other spell warriors in the formation saw this, they flocked after him. At that moment, there were over 1,000 spell warriors in total inside the formation, not to mention the several hundred hidden spell warriors that were controlling the formation's restrictions from within. And Li floated motionlessly inside the mist with his eyes closed. His body was already enveloped in armor composed of the black-tainted gold devouring beetles, and he was standing on a huge azure sword. Above him floated silent, 3-meter-long swarms of sparkling golden beetles. They each appeared extremely malicious and bloodthirsty, as if just waiting for their first opportunity to kill. And Li blinked several times and he slowly opened his eyes, his face wearing a trace of astonishment. As expected, there was a mid-nascent soul stage sage amongst them, but to think that it'd be a female spell warrior. Han Li muttered to himself. After a moment more of thought, he slapped his storage pouch and summoned a set of formation tools in his hands. Han Li's figure blurred as he quickly placed down the mightiest spell formation he could place on such short notice. Han Li swept his sleeve and commanded, "Silvermoon, come out." Small Fox then flew out of his sleeve and landed in front of him. Han Li continued, "I will be giving you the purple cloud lace and the flower basket as well. The opponent this time seems to be even more troublesome than Wanner's senior martial sister. Be careful. If her abilities are truly too fearsome, we won't need to strain ourselves. Let's lure her here and use the green mist restrictions as well as my spell formation to even the odds. If that won't do, then we will simply escape. There is no need for us to stake it all." He then summoned the purple cloud lace and the flower basket into his hand before tossing it to the small white fox. "Yes, master. In that case, I will act the same as last time and stay hidden as I bide my time for an appropriate time to act." Han Li nodded. "That will do. Last time you acted at a very decisive moment to much effect. Many thanks for master's praise. This servant shall strive her hardest." After placing away the two treasures, she smiled and disappeared from sight in a flash of silver light. Han Li then turned to look at the distance, a stern expression appearing on his face. In a burst of azure light, he flew deep into the mist. Not long after the spell warriors entered the mist, the remnant restrictions within it began to stir, repeatedly endangering them. Fortunately for a majority of the spell warriors, the giant rhino was clearing a path, brushing aside the restrictions without care. Regardless whether they be fireballs, lightning, ice spikes, or boulders of earth, they didn't harm the huge beast in the slightest. Its jet-black armor easily brushed off any of the attacks. Paying no heed to any of the attacks, the huge rhino straightforwardly lowered its head and rushed forward. Any restrictions or obstructions that barred its path were struck through as if the beast's body carried the momentum of a shooting star. Its destructive force cleared the mist of an area of over 100 meters around it. As for the many spell warriors following after it, not a single one of them were harmed. However, it was quite baffling that within the group of spell warriors, those with the greatest cultivation were the four at core formation stage. There wasn't a single nascent soul stage sage amongst them. It was unknown where the three nascent soul sages went after they entered the green mist, nor what strange plot they had in store. When these spell warriors saw that the area was clear of the mist, they sighed with relief. The core formation stage spell warriors even gathered together to discuss their next course of action. But at that moment, two sparkling silver halberds suddenly shot out of the mist, leaving thunder in their wake as they arced with lightning. Shocked with alarm, two of the core formation stage spell warriors acted first. They immediately raised their hands and released a blue and red streak of light directly towards the halberds in an attempt to block them. But who could have thought that instead of directly confronting the spell warriors' magic treasures, they changed direction and quickly shot towards the giant rhino's head. Although this had greatly surprised the core formation spell warriors, they soon grew relieved. The giant rhino's defenses weren't something that could be penetrated with ordinary magic treasures. But soon, an astonishing scene had occurred before them. The two silver halberds didn't directly strike at the giant rhino, but instead, they flew above the beast and began to strike each other without warning. Then a huge roll of thunder sounded out as a dense bolt of lightning shot from the two halberds towards the head of the huge beast. A blue light barrier shined from the beast's body, but it was completely scattered by the bolt of silver lightning and directly struck the jet-black armor. With a loud rumble and a flash of lightning, the giant rhino stood in place unscathed. However, the beast was enraged by the attack and loudly roared to the skies before opening its mouth and shooting out a 3-meter-long spike of ice towards the silver halberds above it. Making no attempt to stand their ground, the halberds dodged away from the ice spike before releasing another silver bolt of lightning and flying back into the mist. When the huge beast saw this, its eyes grew crimson, and it chased them down without a further thought. The core formation spell warriors were alarmed and hastily called out to the other spell warriors behind them, each of them intending to give chase to the huge rhino. But before they took action, various colored lights appeared from the mist, revealing over 100 cultivators that had emerged from concealment. Then, they launched a massive assault against the Mulan spell warriors as they released their magic tools into the air. In furious alarm, the Mulan spell warriors also sent out their magic tools and unleashed their spirit techniques, sowing chaos amongst the cultivators. With that delay, the giant rhino had already disappeared into the mist. The core formation stage spell warriors were unable to deal with this, as they were locked into battle against many cultivators at a similar cultivation. In their rage, They thought to call to the spell warriors behind them to assist them and completely wipe out the cultivations. But suddenly, the cultivators had recalled their magic tools and flew back into the mist. When the spell warriors saw this, they glanced at each other with dismay and hesitation, not knowing what they should do next. A late core formation stage old man, the leader of the bunch, pondered for a moment before calmly commanding, "We will split our vast numbers and take action separately. A majority of the restrictions nearby should have already been destroyed. So long as we are careful, it shouldn't pose much of a problem. Since they're using guerrilla tactics, they shouldn't be able to withstand a full-fledged pursuit and will be smoothly exterminated. As for the giant rhino, the core formation cultivators shouldn't be able to harm it. We will find the beast after we kill them." Then taking the lead, the old man flew into the mist pursuing a core formation cultivator that had fled in that direction. Soon, the other spell warriors obeyed and chaotically scattered into the mist in their own groups. The thick mist roiled for a moment before soon growing calm, with not a single person in sight. But a short moment later, a silhouette walked out of the green mist with a calm expression and with his hands held behind his back. He was Old Man Ma. Though his complexion was somewhat pale, his eyes shined spiritedly as if he were in peak condition. He walked out to the center of the empty area and he glanced around before suddenly revealing an odd expression. He then stared at an empty location and calmly said, "Since I've already come out, there is no need for fellow Taoists to continue hiding. Your techniques won't be able to hide you from me." With a cold snort, the black light flashed to reveal the tall, shriveled spell warrior. "I didn't expect that your spiritual sense would still be so strong. I originally planned on giving you a pleasant surprise, but it seems things don't always go as planned." As soon as he appeared, he twisted his hands and raised them towards Old Man Ma. In the following instant, several tens of thumb-thick black streaks shot out in a barrage towards the old man. About a kilometer away from Old Man Ma and the shriveled spell warrior, the bald man was expressionlessly staring at a man across from him, Ku Yao, who was enveloped in a ball of roasting flame. The blaze emitting from his body was so fierce that it turned the nearby mist to ash, creating clear air for 100 meters around him. Ku Yao originally planned on ambushing Old Man Ma from behind and attacking him together with the shriveled spell warrior. However, he didn't expect that he would be blocked by the bald man along the way, much to his fury. He snorted and said, "You think that you'll be able to save your companion by blocking me? Say, when spirit techniques are ferocious beyond your imagination." The bald man remained still as he narrowed his eyes. Rather than paying attention on others, wouldn't it be better if you were focusing on preserving your own life? While fellow Taoist Ma didn't recover his strength from yesterday's battle, you must have exhausted much of your power as well. And with the addition of the great amount of strength needed to direct the spirit technique formation, you are in rather poor shape, unless you have a heaven-defying treasure to assist you. He then opened his mouth and spat out a short white rod. It circled once around his body before suddenly emitting a blinding white light with a tremble. When Ku Yao saw this, his face revealed disdain. But just as he thought to launch his own attack, his expression vastly changed. The color of the light had suddenly changed, and the white light gradually turned golden. At that same moment, a huge golden ape began to form above the short rod. Although its stature wasn't as excessive as the giant rhino, it was 20 meters tall. Under closer inspection, the ape had 4 hairy ears and appeared extremely ugly and fiendish. As soon as it had appeared, it thumped its chest and howled to the sky before glaring at Ku Yao across from it. "Artifact spirit, your magic treasure has an artifact spirit." When Ku Yao saw this, he cried out in alarm. Killing intent leaking from his face, the bald man formed an incantation gesture with his hand. "He, you are the first to witness my 4-eared golden ape artifact spirit. You shouldn't feel too wrong to meet your end by this." The huge ape's body became more distinct, and soon, the short rod grew to 100 meters in length. Now appearing as a true demon bast, it grabbed onto the extended rod and fiercely pounced towards Ku Yao with golden light emitting from its body. The green-robed woman was neither together with the shriveled spell warrior or Ku Yao. Her objective was quite simple. Using her own abilities, she would directly approach the heart of the grand formation and shatter it. With the crux of the formation shattered, the rest would soon follow. Of course, she planned to dispose of a certain cultivator along the way. Ever since she entered the mist, she clearly sensed a faint sliver of spiritual sense coil around her. Even with her vastly powerful spiritual sense, she was unable to block it. While this did cause the woman's heart to tremble, her desire to slay the nascent soul youth only grew stronger. If she didn't eliminate this vastly skilled cultivator, it was quite possible that he could cause great mishaps in the future. Fortunately, this cultivator seemed rather confident of his abilities and didn't conceal himself in the slightest, wishing to draw her in, a mid-nascent soul-stage spell warrior. She met the challenge with a sneer and directly flew towards him. When she sensed the youth was only 300 meters within range, the green-robed woman's body ceased emitting white light and her flight speed slowed before coming to a full stop. Although she was confident in her own abilities, she wasn't clear whether or not she was walking into a trap. She then slapped her storage pouch and summoned a fist-sized azure pearl into her hand. The azure pearl flew above her head, and she struck it with a spell seal. It immediately shined with radiant light before releasing countless threads of azure light that swept past the green mist. With violent sweeps, the wind of light scattered the surrounding mist, leaving an area of 300 meters around her entirely clear. She spotted a youth standing 100 meters away, silently observing her without the slightest emotion. He was Han Li, who had been waiting quite a while for her. A cold glint appeared in the woman's eyes and her bright gaze flickered. Once her spiritual sense swept her surroundings, she frowned and glanced at the sky. About 100 meters above them, there was a cloud of silver and gold silently floating there. When she saw the true appearance of the golden cloud, her expression vastly changed, with the icy intent in her eyes only growing denser. The woman muttered, "Gold-devouring beetles. It turned out that you were the cultivator who possessed them." Han Li was surprised she had recognized them, but he managed to retain his calm. "There seems to be many spell warriors amongst the Mulan that recognize these insects. I am truly surprised. Did the spell warrior who last saw me inform you?" Rather than answer his question, she asked, "The Heavenly Wind Tribe's Sage Mu had his body destroyed by your hand." Betraying not the slight vigilance that grew in his heart, he flatly said, "Sage Mu, the spell warrior that pursued me with the wind-riding chariot. If that is the one, then yes, I am the one who destroyed his body. Were it not for his nascent soul fleeing so quickly, I would have been able to exterminate both spirit and body. Could it be you wish to take vengeance on his behalf?" Since this woman already knew of the celestial ice flames and the thunderstorm wings, he wouldn't be able to catch her off guard, turning her into a somewhat troublesome opponent. All of his battles at nascent soul stage so far, barring one, had been handled by first catching his opponents off guard with the thunderstorm wings and later using the celestial ice flames to freeze them through. Sage Mu's body didn't possess particularly deep cultivation, so its loss isn't anything to complain about. However, you possess many mystical abilities and are able to even control the gold-devouring beetles. Therefore, you will not be escaping me alive." The green-clothed woman's expression sank, and she quickly formed a hand incantation. With white light flashing around her, a white ribbon suddenly floated from her body as it fluttered with the wind. She then twirled her palm and a faint yellow cauldron appeared in her hand. It was refined from some unknown wood, was 4 inches large, and appeared rather antiquated, with cryptic talisman characters carved on its exterior. When Han Li's spiritual sense swept past it, his expression changed. "Your gold-devouring beetles may be an exotic insect from antiquity and nurtured to a stage of invulnerability and ravenous gluttony, but it just so happens that it is capable of being restrained by wood attribute magic treasures, like my yellow spirit cauldron. In the past, I've fought against a soaring tribe's cultivator who commanded gold-devouring beetles, and I sought this cauldron in preparation to deal with him when I met him again. But I didn't think that I'd first meet a heavenly south cultivator that used them rather than him. Were this not the case, I would have found such a large number of gold-devouring beetles difficult to deal with, regardless of how mature they were." Once the green-clothed woman finished speaking with a cold tone, she stroked the small cauldron with her delicate hand and caused it to magnificently shine with light. A translucent light barrier faintly appeared. When Han Li heard this, he curled his cheek and soon wore a grave expression. "There are others that use gold-devouring beetles." "You don't know of it. Gold-devouring beetles are the sacred insects of the soaring tribes, our archenemies. Their ancestors spent an immense amount of time before finally nurturing several tens of fully mature gold-devouring beetles. Only the most distinguished of their cultivators were allowed to inherit them. But ever since those times, an unknown number of spell warriors were devoured by them, becoming a target of hatred amongst the Mulan. Since you possess so many of them, I cannot allow you to pass them down, regardless of how mature they may be." With that said, she expressionlessly tossed the small cauldron above her. The small cauldron circled once above her, and in a flash of light, it shot a pillar light directly towards the cloud of beetles in the sky. Han Li was dumbstruck to hear that there already existed fully mature gold-devouring beetles in this world, but when he heard her malicious tone, he regained his bearings and tossed the matter to the back of his mind. His heart sank upon seeing her use the cauldron to directly attack the beetles with wood spirit chi. With a fierce expression momentarily appearing on his face, he pointed to them and had the golden cloud disperse into countless golden petals. In the blink of an eye, the beetles could hardly be seen. As a result, the yellow light had missed its mark. The woman was stunned, but something soon came to mind, and she swept her spiritual sense into the mist nearby. A short moment later, she frowned, and an icy aura enveloped her face. You actually commanded the gold-devouring beetles to attack the other spell warriors. You believe that you can afford to be distracted. Before she even finished speaking, she had already flung her white ribbon towards Han Li. The ribbon shined with dazzling white light as it circled in the air before transforming into a snow-white hawk that spanned about 6 meters in length, with eyes of flame and jet-black claws. It flapped its wings, and it instantly disappeared in a flash of white light, reappearing a moment later above Han Li's head. Then, with a caw, it swooped down with its razor-sharp claws aiming at it. The huge hawk was extremely fast. In Han Li's alarm, he raised his hand out of instinct, shooting several 10 arcs of golden lightning from his palm, forming a large golden net to meet in the incoming hawk. When the white hawk saw this, its eyes ominously glinted and its wings trembled. The wind boomed. Countless blades of wind shot out in a dense barrage to meet the incoming net of golden lightning. Explosions sounded out as golden and white light intertwined. Upon contact, the golden net had blocked a majority of the blades of wind, but they were too strong. The net of lightning was cut through, and several tens of wind blades shot towards Han Li with the huge hawk closely following after them. Yi, despite the astonishment betrayed from his eyes, the rest of his face remained expressionless. He flicked his fingers, releasing over 10 azure sword streaks to meet the blades of wind. Soon after, he flipped his palm and a small blue shield appeared in his hand. With a slight tremor, the blue shield grew several times larger, extending to 3 meters in length. Lustrous blue light fluidly wandered from its surface as if it were truly made of liquid, making for an exceptionally odd sight. At that moment, the azure sword streaks had shattered the blades of wind and were about to strike the hawk. The hawk showed no fear and flapped its wings, sweeping away the azure chi before continuing its sweep down towards the huge blue shield. Han Li coldly snorted and pointed to the shield, causing it to shine with greater magnificence. Consequently, the hawk's claws struck an icy surface, leaving only ripples behind. But in that instant of delay, an icy glint flashed from Han Li's eyes and he raised his hand. A black light suddenly emerged from his palm, transforming into a black-red hand that was 3 meters wide. It shot out at a speed greater than lightning and forcefully grabbed the huge hawk. Whoosh! Yin flames suddenly emerged from the hand and enveloped the hawk in pitch-black flames. The hawk attempted to escape its grasp as it miserably wailed and fiercely picked the hand. Han Li grew relieved at the sight of this and turned his head towards the woman. The woman didn't appear to mind that her hawk was captured. Instead, she was muttering an ancient incantation with a solemn expression. Upon closer inspection, Han Li wasn't able to understand it in the slightest, much to his shock. Soon after, the woman spread out her fingers in the style of a lotus flower, and white light began to flicker, forming what seemed to be a white lotus. Although Han Li didn't know what she was planning, she was still a mid-nascent soul-stage cultivator. Anything that took an incantation this long was certain to be powerful. He couldn't allow her to smoothly succeed. Once that was thought, Han Li flung out his sleeve with a grave expression, summoning several tens of azure flying swords in a swarm. They then condensed together into a mist and charged towards the green-clothed woman. Taking advantage of this delay, Han Li raised his other arm towards the huge hand that was tightly gripping the bird. The black-red hand suddenly gripped with further force and instantly dragged the bird before him. Without a thought, Han Li spat a sliver of blue icy flame onto the struggling bird. Crackling, the blue flame instantly covered the bird in a layer of sparkling frost. The resulting ice sculpture captured its desperate struggle in a lifelike image. A trace of satisfaction appeared on his face, but just when he thought to collect it, he heard a series of divine rings in front of him. Blinding white radiance suddenly erupted from the woman, covering the surrounding area of 300 meters under a layer of white light. Han Li inwardly cursed and hastily looked at the strange scene from across him. The green-clothed woman had finished her incantation, but now, the white lotus had left her hand and was floating 3 meters above her head. It continuously unfolded its petals as it shined with dazzling light. As for the cloud of sword chi that he unleashed, it was stopped about 40 meters away from her as it attempted its hardest to make its way towards her. It seemed to be blocked by something invisible. And Li unconsciously narrowed his eyes. It appeared the White Lotus wasn't something that was created from a treasure, but was rather something that was formed from the woman's own magic power. Han Li was truly amazed that something this powerful was solely produced by a technique. However, this amazement only lasted for only a moment. He took a deep breath with a sullen expression and quickly raised his arm, cover it in a layer of faint black chi. The black chi appeared alive as it continuously lashed around and grew thicker. By the time it became pitch black, Han Li's expression grew stern. His arm quickly swelled, becoming 3 times as thick in the blink of an eye. Soon, a layer of dazzling crimson light began to cover the black chi in an incredibly bizarre display. At that moment, Han Li glanced coldly at the green-robed woman, and just as it so happened, the woman also raised her head to look at him. Their eyes met. Then when her eyes saw Han Li's monstrous arm, a cold glint shined from them. "Go!" Han Li roared and dropped his arm, releasing a semicircular mass of black-red light. Once it left his arm, it grew to the length of 10 meters. It ripped through space as remnants of light dragged behind it, instantly arriving before the White Lotus. The green-robed woman raised her brow at the sight of the Yin Devil execution and spat out a mist of lustrous white chi onto the lotus. In an instant, a huge lotus mirage suddenly emerged from the White Lotus, enveloping both itself and the woman. In a flash of light, the Yin Devil execution rammed into the lotus mirage and easily cleaved into it. But after traveling 10 meters deep into the mirage, it slowed down before coming to a stop. A trace of pride appeared on the woman's face, but soon, her expression vastly changed. At that moment, she saw Han Li fling a black object at her. As soon as it left his hand, it began to exponentially expand and overbearingly pound downwards on both woman and lotus. The thousand-fold mountain. When the woman saw this huge towering mountain, she couldn't help but shout its name. This ancient treasure was renowned amongst spell warriors. Even if a mid-nascent soul-stage spell warrior like her were to use a secret Buddhist technique from antiquity, they wouldn't be able to receive an attack from the mountain unscathed. The green-robed woman formed a hand incantation without a further thought, immersing the White Lotus above her, the small yellow cauldron, and herself in a fusion of white light. In an instant, the air surrounding the lotus became completely still before suddenly erupting with azure radiance. The woman came into view once more. Despite no longer being sustained by the woman's magic power, the lotus mirage grew dim and didn't immediately fade away. It managed to last for a short moment before being completely scattered by the descending mountain. Revealing not the slightest joy from his face, Han Li muttered, "Wind movement technique." He then began to inwardly curse. He didn't expect that this woman would be capable of a strange movement technique on par with his lightning movement. In this case, he wouldn't be able to harm her unless he somehow trapped her. He had managed to come up with a plan, but he felt unsure of it. She was as skilled with her wind movement technique as he was with his thunderstorm wings. So long as he managed to keep up with her, he was confident that he would be able to easily wound her with the fearsomeness of the celestial ice flames. With that thought, Han Li raised his hands and pointed to the black-red light and the tens of bamboo cloudswarm swords that had finally escaped their restraints. Quickly, they fiercely shot towards where the green-robed woman had appeared. Thunder then roared from behind Han Li and silver wings appeared from his back. As for his blue-lit shield, he waved both his arms and it quickly shrunk before flying back into Han Li's sleeve. At that same moment, the huge black-red hand relaxed its grip on the white ribbon hawk, and it streaked towards the woman in a ball of black light. But that was not the end of his preparations. He raised his arms once more, but this time, a blue flame emerged from his palm. It crackled with a wavering blue brilliance. Finally, Han Li took it upon himself to personally close in on her, having done what he could to restrict her movements. In a flash of silver lightning, he disappeared, leaving only rolls of thunder in his wake. When the woman saw Han Li release so many treasures in a single display, she felt her head suddenly ache. She originally believed that this measly early nascent soul cultivator's power only extended to a few strange abilities. So long as these abilities were restrained, she should be able to smoothly deal with him. She didn't expect that in a single move, he would unleash several powerful treasures in succession. In comparison, the only treasure she released had been restrained by her opponent. As someone who was used to being revered amongst the spell warriors, this embarrassment had given rise to fury. However, The woman clearly understood that since he possessed so many treasures, it would be difficult to injure him with ordinary techniques and treasures, let alone kill him. When she saw Han Li flap his wings and disappear in a flash of lightning, she snorted and eventually came to a decision to exhaust a bit of her strength and finish Han Li off with one of her killing moves. Of course, she couldn't allow Han Li to easily approach her during this time. As she pondered this, the white lotus had dropped down onto her head and disappeared into her body. Just as this happened, Han Li's figure appeared about 10 meters away from the woman's body in a flash of lightning. With a blur of his body, he suddenly appeared 3 meters away from her, and hastily extended his cackling blue palm against the yellow barrier that surrounded the woman's body. Han Li was confident that the wood attribute barrier placed by the cauldron would be broken by the celestial ice flames, and his attack smoothly succeeded. However, the woman remained still and showed no indication that she was going to use her wind evasion technique. An unease filled his heart as a shiver spread across his back. At that moment, the woman suddenly shined with a soft white radiance as lotus petal mirages blossomed from her body. And against expectation, the faint yellow light barrier that Han Li just struck had actually managed to withstand his attack. Just as the white light and the blue flames made contact, Han Li felt his entire arm tremble. In the instant that the white brilliance shined, the lotus petals began to sweep towards him. Although they appeared slow, he wasn't able to evade their attacks, and he could only helplessly stare as the petals struck his body. Astonished, Han Li was struck back, a wave of pain assailing his chest. He was launched 100 meters away before he managed to barely stop himself, his body swaying. He glanced at the woman with alarm as he held his hand against his chest. He glanced up and saw the green-robed woman was now standing above a lotus that spanned 10 meters wide. White lotus petals were slowly fluttering all around her, and the woman herself was coldly staring at Han Li. The treasures he had launched to attack her, they had been easily stopped by the petals surrounding her. They were far more powerful than the lotus mirage from before. At that moment, Han Li suddenly felt his throat become hot, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He wryly smiled in his mind. He had suffered quite a bit in that exchange. Han Li then spat out the turbulent qi in his body and slowly moved his palm away from his chest. He glanced down at his chest to see that his robes were already shattered, revealing a tricolored luster that laid underneath. The battle armor had a huge dent in it with thumb-sized cracks on it. Han Li felt his breath turn cold, and the pain he felt from his chest became far sharper. With a gloomy face, he raised his head to look at the green-robed woman. As a result, he saw both astonishment and disappointment from her face when she laid her eyes on his armor. He coldly snorted and tore away at the remnants of his robe, revealing the beetle armor in its entirety. Then, in an azure flash of light, he swept his hand across the armor and repaired it with an unbelievable speed to its original condition. Shock appeared for just a moment on the woman's face, but her cold demeanor was soon restored as her killing intent against Han Li only grew stronger. Without further thought, she placed her palm against her chest and began to utter a cryptic incantation. A ball of azure light then flew out of her sleeve and dropped into her hand. The light faded away to reveal an azure oil lamp of ancient and worn condition. It appeared even slightly blackened. The green-robed woman looked at the lamp with a faint reluctance to use it, but then she turned her eyes to fiercely glare at Han Li. This scene left Han Li with a slight sense of dread. He didn't know what kind of ancient treasure this bronze lamp was, and this was the first time he ever saw a treasure lamp. Various thoughts quickly passed by his mind before he decided to fly into the sky and recall his treasures. Then, with a flap of his wings, he disappeared. He reappeared in front of the frozen ribbon hawk, and bluntly took it into his hand before disappearing once more, reappearing on the border of the dense mist. The green-robed woman's mouth dropped in amazement. Ever since she ascended to her current cultivation, she encountered many fearsome opponents that had been her match, but this was the first time she saw a high-grade cultivator turn tail and run. But when she saw Han Li take her ribbon hawk with him, she awoke from her stupor with fury. Grasping onto the lamp, she glided through the air on the white lotus, closely following him in a breeze. Afterwards, she entered the dense fog and disappeared without a trace. Azure light flashed with each appearance of silver lightning, closely chasing after it. The sounds of thunder and wind intertwined. In an instant, Han Li lured the green-robed woman into an unfamiliar area of the formation. It was there that Han Li stopped and glanced at the frozen ribbon hawk in his hand. With a cold chuckle, golden lightning flashed from his hand and shattered it. The ice-clad ribbon hawk shattered into pieces alongside the ice. But when the green-robed woman saw this while she was pursuing him, she coldly laughed and stamped down on the white lotus below her, causing it to scatter away the nearby mist with a wild gale. Han Li narrowed his eyes, staring at her malicious expression. He calmly asked, "Is fellow Taoist not heartbroken that her treasure was destroyed, or do you believe my actions weren't enough to destroy the treasure?" With that said, he casually glanced at the cleared air, not paying any attention to the shards of ice that were floating in the air. "How about you tell me?" The green-robed woman pointed at Han Li, insteadly causing the countless shards of ice at Han Li's side to shine with white light. Han Li was stunned and immediately raised his arm, unleashing an azure mist to engulf the glowing ice. But in that moment, the ice shattered and specks of white light escaped from them, each of them flocking towards the woman. The azure mist was too late. Seeing that his attack failed, his face grew sullen, but he stayed his hand rather than waste his effort on attacks that might have no effect. He saw that white light was condensing in front of her, soon reaching the size of a head-sized ball. With a spell seal striking the ball, a hawk's cry immediately sounded out from the ball in a blinding flash of white light before taking shape of the snow-white hawk from before. When Han Li saw this, he frowned, but soon he took note of how its spirit was listless compared to before. He revealed a pensive expression at the sight. It seemed shattering the treasure did have some effect. The hawk wasn't truly immortal. He was sure that after killing the hawk several more times, it would definitely turn to ash and scatter. Despite seeing that the hawk had weakened, she wordlessly waved her arm and commanded it to take to the skies. It then twirled in the air before drifting back down as a white ribbon. Once it touched the woman's body, it disappeared. With one hand holding the lamp, she brushed her hair with the other. With a detached tone, she said, "Your sudden stop must have been to infuriate me by shattering my magic treasure. It seems that this place should be your contingency plan." Han Li grew silent for a moment before speaking with spirited eyes. "Since you already knew this and chased me, it seems you hold much confidence in the treasure in your hand. Perhaps you might tell me something of it. This is the first time I've ever seen a lantern-type ancient treasure." The woman's face grew sullen. She said without reservation, "No, rather how about I send you off to the underworld?" She then opened her mouth and spat a ball of nascent flame into the lantern. Specks of azure light then began to slowly rise up from it. Han Li sighed and he swept his arms, summoning a green formation flag and a red azure formation plate into his hands. He took a deep glance at the woman before tossing the small formation flag in the air. He quickly struck it with a small seal and hurriedly muttered an incantation. The formation flag flashed with light, instantly causing a green mist to suddenly form. It extended 100 meters around the sky and scattered with the wind before transforming into a 40-meter-long flood dragon of green mist. At that same time, Han Li ordered the flood dragon to attack the woman. He had the formation plate in his hand shine with radiance. He tossed it underneath him and had it immediately transform into white mist as it disappeared further from sight. Suddenly, the seas of mist down below began to roil and release countless threads of red azure light that shot towards the green-robed woman in a dense barrage. He then took out a small silver bell with a wave of his sleeve. It wildly expanded in the blink of an eye and began to release silver sound waves with a loud ring. Then, with all of that done, he streaked towards the green-robed woman's head. Since he wasn't able to grow close to the woman, he would make use of silver sound waves to attack. Perhaps a formless attack would have some effect. Of course, against the green-robed woman's white lotus flower and the unknown bronze lamp, Han Li's killing move wasn't any of the attacks he released. Rather, it was Silvermoon who had burrowed herself earlier in the earth. At that moment, Silvermoon had already begun to unravel the purple cloud lace and was standing at the center of the formation. She was waiting for when the green-clothed woman would let down her guard so she could deliver the fatal blow. Although the green-clothed woman didn't know that there was someone lying in ambush, she turned a blind eye to the restrictions and attacks that Han Li unleashed. She only lowered her head to look at the lamp that was flickering with weak azure flames. A sneer appeared on her face. She unhurriedly raised her arm and nimbly took out a pea-sized flame from the lantern with two of her fingers. At that moment, the flood dragon of mist, the threads of azure-red light, and the silver sound waves were all about to strike her. The woman didn't reveal any worry in the slightest and simply pointed to the white lotus down below her feet. White light flashed and it began to quickly revolve. Its petals contracted before instantly shrouding the woman in an impenetrable barrier. The flood dragon of mist was the first to strike the barrier. It opened its mouth and spouted out a surging breath of green mist. At that same moment, a white lotus petal from within the barrier lightly swept and scattered the attack. Then the red azure threads followed. They had also been scattered. Only the sound waves weren't blocked by the white lotus petals. They passed through the barrier, but it was unknown what effect they would have. When Han Li saw this, he formed an incantation gesture with his hands, and the red azure light threads ceased their attacks on the barrier. Instead, they formed a huge net and quickly layered upon themselves, blocking the white lotus from every side. As for the mist flood dragon, it surged and transformed into a large expanse of green mist, submerging the white lotus within it. As for the silver bell, it quickly arrived before the white lotus and was controlled with Han Li's full strength. The silver sound waves became stronger and continuously struck at the green-clothed woman through the barrier. For a time, the green-clothed woman from within the white lotus seemed to be restrained. However, Han Li didn't appear happy about this in the slightest. Rather, he furrowed his brow at the sight. As Han Li worried that the attacks actually made no difference, the contracted petals of the lotus immediately blossomed and spread out without the slightest warning. The petals were each razor-sharp. The surrounding mist and threads of light were completely scattered as soon as the flower unfolded. Han Li appeared particularly grim at the sight. The beautiful, green-robed woman was standing at the center of the white lotus with an expressionless face. She held the bronze lamp in one hand and clasped a seemingly ordinary blue flame in the other. She glanced at Han Li and then looked above him at the silver bell that was enveloping the woman in silver sound waves. A harsh expression flickered from her eyes. She suddenly raised her hand and sent an ember of flame into the bronze lantern. It crackled and trembled before instantly disappearing from sight. In the next moment, the huge silver bell was struck by an azure fireball out of nowhere and was enveloped by it. When the woman saw this, she uttered an incantation and had the surface of the silver bell scorched by the unknown azure devil flame. The silver bell wailed for a moment and released silver light in an attempt to resist the flames. But after an instant, the silver bell was deformed by the silver flames and turned into molten silver. After that, the azure devil flame scattered without a trace. Han Li's face paled at the sight of the ancient treasure being scattered. At that moment, the green-clothed woman swept her hand and picked off another azure ember from the lamp with practiced ease, and malicious glanced at Han Li. Han Li inwardly cursed and flapped his thunderstorm wings without another thought. He then disappeared, leaving only thunder in his place. The woman didn't mind this in the slightest and dropped the azure ember into the lantern. Just as she was about to blow spiritual chi into it, purple light suddenly flashed beneath her, and a 40-meter-wide purple net rushed towards her from below. As the green-clothed woman stood in place, she suddenly heard another woman's laughter before being instantly shrouded in a purple net. A beautiful woman suddenly emerged with a yellow flash of light soon after the purple net appeared. She chuckled and said, "Since you're fond of playing with fire, how about witnessing the might of my purple cloudlace's Jade Sun flames?" She raised her hand. The purple net flickered with flame, covering it with a layer of azure-white flame. There were even several azure-white flame serpents that suddenly emerged from the net and fiercely attacked the white lotus. Soon, the white lotus was entirely engulfed in blue-white flame. At that moment, Han Li appeared about 40 meters away from the green-robed woman with a smile on his face. He flung out his sleeve and summoned his 72 bamboo cloudswarm swords before him. Once they swarmed into the sky, he struck them with several spell seals in quick succession. The flying swords released a clear ring and condensed together into a 20-meter-long sword. Thunder roared from within it as dense arcs of lightning began to shoot off from the sword, transforming the sword into one of thunder and lightning. However, Han Li didn't stop there. He took a deep breath and he spat a thread of celestial ice flame onto the sword, adding a layer of faint blue flames onto the surface of the sword. Han Li pointed at the sword with an icy glint shining from his eyes. It trembled before cleaving directly towards the white lotus. At that moment, the green-clothed woman finally realized what had happened. In furious alarm, she flung the azure ember above her. As soon as the azure ember left the green-robed woman's hands, it shined with blinding azure light. Afterwards, it began to revolve around her head and give rise to an astonishing display. The azure-white flames that burned on the exterior of the white lotus was overtaken by the lantern ember and were quickly absorbed. Once the Jade Sun flames were cleanly absorbed, the flaming ember floating above her head had stopped and were simply shining slightly brighter. The green-robed woman then pointed at the ember and had it flutter in the direction of Silvermoon. Silvermoon was greatly alarmed and pointed at the purple cloudlace without another thought. Suddenly, the purple net brightly shined with light and a portion of it moved in front of her. At that same moment, the ancient flower basket appeared in her hand. Then, the huge azure sword, roaring with thunder, arrived above the woman, immediately striking down at her under Han Li's command. Of course, Silvermoon conducted a joint attack at that moment. She had the flower basket envelop her body as white mist and clutched her hands in an incantation gesture, opening a large hole in the white lotus barrier in a sudden flash of purple light. Having witnessed the astonishing pressure of the huge sword, the woman's expression changed in alarm, wearing a grave expression for the first time in this encounter. After a moment of hesitation, she ceased her attack on Silvermoon and completely concentrated her body's spiritual power into the white lotus beneath her. In an instant, the white lotus petals surrounding her increased several times in number, and mirages of lotuses began to fold around her in a dense barrier. At that moment, she suddenly pointed at the lantern ember and had it return to flying above her head. Afterwards, the woman lifted the copper lantern in her head and waved it in front of her. A series of azure flame mirages appeared along with 2 flame embers. The 2 flame embers then flew towards the woman's head and condensed together with the original azure flame ember to form a first-sized azure fireball. At that moment, the huge sword arrived at the lotus petal barrier. Rolls of thunder and a huge rumbling explosion sounded out as white light, golden lightning, and blue flame entwined. While the tensome lotus petals were rather remarkable, the divine devilbane lightning and the celestial ice flames were also a force to be reckoned with. While they alone might not be able to overcome the lotus mirages, when combined together into the huge sword, the combined might of 72 bamboo cloudswarm swords eventually shattered through the lotus mirages, despite their greatest attempt to resist, and faded away into specks of starlight. Unimpeded, the huge sword continued its descent, only for the blue ball of flame to unhurriedly meet it. Han Li's expression turned solemn at the sight. Although he felt some fear towards this odd azure flame, he was quite interested in measuring the might of the celestial ice flame against the lantern's flame. The impact between the huge sword and the azure fireball was completely silent. Regardless of whether it be the golden lightning or the icy flames, they were both instantly consumed by the azure flame. It then began to engulf the huge sword. The bamboo cloudswarm swords were Han Li's bonded magic treasure, so it was natural for him to feel it quite closely. In the instant the azure flames completely enveloped the huge sword, he felt his mind tremble as unbearable pain and scorching heat assailed him. His body's temperature abruptly risen. He could almost feel his blood boil. In great alarm, Han Li instantly formed an incantation gesture and pointed to the huge sword. With that done, the sword wildly flickered and transformed back into many small swords before scattering. He originally believed that this would rid him of the strange flame, but when he clearly saw what happened, his expression vastly changed. All of his flying swords were simultaneously covered in burning azure flame. Han Li's expression wavered as he felt his body's condition worsen. Sweat began to profuse from his body. He gritted his teeth in astonishment and quickly cycled through several hand incantations, ordering the 10 strands of spiritual sense controlling the flying swords to fly to the sky. Then, in an attempt to escape the flames, they began to wildly revolve. Having saw the silver bell melted into silver liquid, he grew even more fearful of having his own bonded magic treasure destroyed. If this were the case, his vitality and spiritual sense would suffer a great decrease. At that moment, the destroyed lotus mirages had been replaced as more lotuses emerged from below her to restore the gap. The woman then coldly glanced at Han Li's flame-clad flying swords. The woman sneered upon seeing the swords flutter around in an attempt to extinguish the flames. However, she didn't rush to act. She simply waited for Han Li's bonded magic treasure to be destroyed, for his cultivation to be greatly damaged. A short moment later, the woman's sneer had froze, soon to be replaced with astonishment. The bronze lamp in her head was no common magic tool. Strictly speaking, it didn't even belong to her. It was one of the 2 lineage treasures that were passed down by the Mulan tribes. The Sagela was able to acquire this treasure not only because of her profound cultivation, but also because she was the most powerful female spell warrior in the Mulan. Most importantly, she was the only woman who held a similar rank to the soaring tribe's Saintess Tianlin, and received much esteem amongst other high-grade spell warriors. Even the Mulan's 3 divine sages had to treat her with respect. Ever since she acquired this ancient treasure, she had only used the lantern a few times due to its restrictions and peculiarities. When the treasure reached the maximum quantity of uses, it would immediately be revoked and be given to the next suitable master. The treasure was held with great importance amongst the Mulan. However, the most important use for the bronze lantern wasn't for battle. Rather, it had a specific and extremely important use. Of course, this treasure was obviously powerful in battle, and was used by its masters to slay many formidable enemies and destroy countless treasures. Be they ancient or magic treasures, the flames were incapable of being extinguished once they were covered. Wood attribute treasures were particularly vulnerable to the flames and would be destroyed in an instant. But while Han Li's set of flying swords were obviously wood attribute magic treasures, they had been enveloped in the lantern's flames for quite a while and didn't show the slightest indication of becoming ash. But in the instant that she was absorbed by her surprise, purple light suddenly flashed above her head, along with the abrupt appearance of a purple cloud. The green-robed woman was stunned, and she turned her gaze to look at Silvermoon, who had used the opportunity to launch a restriction with the purple cloud lace. Then, with a turn of her body, Silvermoon filled the air with a fragrant pink mist, covering the White Lotus in the blink of an eye. The green-robed woman snorted and glanced at the lantern in her hand. After a moment of hesitation, she decided not to further use it and instead raised her arm, summoning a yellow jade pendant into her hand. Just as she thought to activate the pendant and deal with Silvermoon, the pink fragrant mist was shaken, and the scent grew stronger. Afterwards, countless handsome men and beautiful women began to emerge from the mist and embrace each other in an extremely bold and intimate fashion, causing the green-robed woman's complexion to grow scarlet. "She demon, you're courting death." The woman's complexion soon grew pale, and yellow light glowed from the jade pendant. Yellow mist enveloped her and scattered the pink mist around her. However, Silvermoon could no longer be seen. The green-robed woman sneered, but just as she thought to seek Silvermoon out, something suddenly came to mind, and she hastily glanced in Han Li's direction. In the short amount of time that Silvermoon had bothered her, Han Li had already condensed his flying swords back into its huge form and recalled it before him. He was currently staring at it with a grave expression. The woman was hit by another wave of shock upon seeing that the flying swords had yet to be scorched, but she was no longer about to continue staying still. She immediately raised the bronze lantern in her head, but just as she thought whether or not she should waste another of its uses to strike down Han Li, he suddenly placed both of his hands on his chest. With one hand holding a mist of white frost and the other holding blue flickering flames, he spat a mist of azure chi to envelop them together. With a gust of wind, an egg-sized purple flame appeared in his hand. Han Li pointed it with his free hand, and it suddenly ruptured before transforming into a small fluttering bird. It spread its wings and charged towards the huge sword that was enveloped in the lantern's azure flames. With a light bang, a strange scene occurred before them. The purple flame and the azure flame blazed on the surface of the huge sword. Both of the flames swayed and gave neither way to one another, giving its utmost to consume the other. For a time, neither flame had the advantage. As Han Li observed this with a nervous expression, the green-robed woman appeared even more shocked. What were these purple flames to not fear the flames of her lantern? Had she not seen this personally, she wouldn't have dared to believe it. But this woman soon awoke from her shock and only felt a stronger desire to kill Han Li. How could a mere early nascent soul cultivator possess so many heaven-defying abilities? If he were to enter mid or even late nascent soul stage, he could sweep through the entire Mulan plains without a match. With that thought, the woman's expression grew sullen and she flung the lantern in the air. It stopped about 3 meters above her. She then solemnly sat down. At the moment, the woman had truly resolved herself. Even if she consumed all uses of the bronze lantern, she would slay Han Li with complete certainty. Han Li had also taken note of the woman's actions, and he felt his heart drop. He bitterly cursed it in his mind before deciding to retreat. Although he still had the purple apex flames and the blood devil sword, there was no need for him to stake it all on this fight. The woman before him was no ordinary mid-nascent soul stage cultivator. He was particularly unwilling to end this battle in mutual destruction. As these thoughts stirred in Han Li's mind, a silhouette suddenly appeared in the mist and charged towards them, much to their surprise. As the both of them were distracted, purple cloud formed from the purple cloud lace above the green-robed woman's head and suddenly parted and released an immensely fast streak of white that flew towards the lantern. Then, in a flash of white light, the lantern was completely enveloped by the light and was fiercely dragged back towards the purple cloud. Han Li rejoiced at seeing the bronze lantern seized, much to the green-robed woman's despair. In an instant, her face paled with an expression of furious alarm. Soon after, she raised her arms, sweeping a white mist around her. The white lotus below her began to wildly revolve, producing a lotus mirage that appeared as large as a mountain. Once the white light holding the lantern returned to the cloud, the huge lotus mirage had already launched after it in pursuit. The purple cloud then transformed into a large purple net and dropped down. In the next instant, the lotus struck the net, releasing a glow of purple and white light. Silvermoon's sweet chuckle soon followed. After the purple net was released, the white light faded away to reveal Silvermoon. She laughed as she held onto the ancient flower basket. Its interior shined with white light as it rigidly trapped the bronze lantern. Once the green-robed woman's spiritual sense was wiped from it, it would be capable of being used by anyone. Before Han Li could bask in his excitement, a silhouette staggered towards them and spotted both Han Li and the green-robed woman engaged in battle. The silhouette shouted to Han Li in panic, "Fellow Taoist Han, quickly run. A Mulan divine sage has arrived. He's already killed fellow Taoist Lu. Hurry and run." This silhouette had turned out to be Old Man Ma, but his hair was disheveled and one of his arms was missing. A Mulan divine sage. Han Li felt his heart drop upon hearing this. Just as he thought to ask further of the matter, Old Man Ma flew away in a flash of white light, not daring to stay a moment longer. But at that moment, an indifferent man's voice soon arrived. "You're too late, I've already found you. You had abandoned your arm to escape calamity, but let's see what other secret techniques you have. Surely you didn't refine a substitution puppet out of your other arm as well. If that's the case, I will truly hold you and admire. Yeah. Is this not the bright origin lantern? You cunning scoundrel, your courage is quite great. A little fox such as yourself dares to take a lineage treasure of the Mulan." The words were spoken in quick succession, and the speaker of the voice soon arrived before them. A silver streak of light shot out from the sea of mist in a seemingly slow manner, but it instantly arrived before Silvermoon. Silvermoon's complexion grew deathly pale, and she hastily waved her arm, summoning a purple net in front of her. At that same moment, she instantly took off without a further thought. The silver streak paused for just a moment before immediately transforming into a large silver hand. It forcibly took the purple cloud lace in its grasp and formed a fist before striking at the air in the direction that Silvermoon had fled. As Silvermoon flew off in a streak of yellow light, she was suddenly struck by a silver ball of light out of seemingly nowhere. With a miserable wail, her yellow light disappeared and she fell from the sky. But in her cunning, she gritted her teeth and bore through the pain, throwing the ancient flower basket towards Han Li in a streak of white light. "You're courting death." The man's voice grew furious, and in a flicker of light, the silver hand split into two, with one chasing the flower basket, and the other chasing after the falling Silvermoon in an attempt to crush her. The action was conducted as swiftly as a flash of lightning. Silvermoon turned pale with fright, and she hastily attempted to draw on her magic power to escape. However, silver light flashed from her body, and she found herself incapable of drawing any of her magic power. That surprise strike from before had not only heavily injured her, but it had placed a simple restriction on her body. Although it could be easily broken, she was caught by surprise and didn't have the time to dispel it. The huge silver hand approached her with the momentum of a falling mountain, and she felt her heart tremble. She could only shut her eyes as she waited for death, but at that moment she heard thunder roar behind her. With an arm holding her by the waist, she had somehow escaped from the silver hand's grasp. "We're going." Han Li made a clear appearance before disappearing from sight with Silvermoon in tow. The huge silver hand had missed its mark by just a sliver. In the next moment, Han Li appeared 100 meters away at the edge of the mist with a sullen expression. He carried Silvermoon in one hand, and the huge sword blazing with azure and purple flames in the other. "Yi, lightning movement." An astonished voice came from the huge silver hand. As for the other hand, it returned with the flower basket in its grasp. The two silver hands then combined together in a brilliant glow of light, disappearing to reveal a middle-aged spell warrior in scholar robes. He held onto the purple cloud lace with one hand, and he grabbed the ancient flower basket with the other. He was examining Han Li in the distance with a calm expression. When Old Man Ma had seen this person appear, his face became deathly pale, and despite the light that continuously pulsed from his body, he didn't dare to flee. Han Li's gaze flickered as he carefully examined the very first late-nascent soul stage cultivator he had seen for the first time. Apart from the few sparse cultivators that managed to reach deity transformation stage, late-nascent soul stage cultivators were peak existences in the cultivation world. At that moment, the middle-aged spell warrior glanced around and spotted the green-robed woman surnamed La. With a wave of his hand, he tossed the ancient flower basket containing the bronze lantern towards her. "Many thanks for divine sage Zhang's assistance. Had brother Zhang not come, The green-robed woman was delighted that she managed to regain possession of the bronze lamp and felt immense relief. Even as arrogant and cold as she may be, she was facing one of the three Mulan divine sages, and she didn't dare to offend him in the slightest. Scholarly middle-aged man calmly said, "It's nothing. I've simply heard that the Heavenly South cultivators were sending reinforcements towards this grand formation. After hearing about Heaven Weep's death, I grew somewhat worried and came over to take a look. It'd be best to give those from the state of Great Jin a reasonable explanation as we are currently intertwined with them. But since our enemy is capable of using lightning movement, it is no wonder even Sage La has a problem dealing with him." Afterwards, he turned to look at Han Li and asked, "That small fox is yours. It is quite courageous to dare to act against our Mulan's lineage treasure. Since you're her master, then I'd best deal with the both of you." Han Li narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. He snorted and icily replied, "Your tone is quite arrogant, but even if we didn't touch that lantern, would you still let us go free? I don't know if you have the skill to take my life." When the scholarly man heard this, his gaze swept past the huge sword in Han Li's hand. His face revealed astonishment upon seeing the azure and purple flames tangle against one another, but soon he chuckled as if he hadn't seen it. "It has been many years since a cultivator dared to say that in front of me. Sage La, I'll hand that one-armed cultivator over there to you. As for our young friend capable of lightning movement, I'll be personally dealing with him. Let's see just how long he can last." Ruthless intent revealed from the man's face as his body suddenly blurred and silver light flashed from both his sides. Suddenly, two exact replicas of the scholarly man appeared at his side with the exact same clothes and face. They both stared at Han Li as if he were already dead. Han Li felt his breath run cold. He quickly swept his spiritual sense and couldn't find any difference between the two incarnations and the original. Be it their aura of cultivation or appearance, they were completely the same. Despite the dread he felt in his heart, Han Li patted Silvermoon's shoulder and quickly whispered something to her. Silvermoon obediently nodded. Having already dispelled the restriction on her body, she returned to the form of a small fox in a flash of white light and swiftly entered Han Li's sleeve. At that moment, the three scholarly men swept their sleeves and slowly made their way towards Han Li. Their movements clearly appeared relaxed, but in a matter of only 3 steps, they had already arrived only 30 meters away from Han Li. With a vastly changed expression, Han Li flapped his wings without another moment of thought and disappeared from sight. "You want to leave, but where can you run?" the middle of the 3 scholarly men said with a chuckle. Afterwards, the 3 of them flickered with silver light and pursued him with a relaxed stride. With 2 steps taken in the air, the 3 of them also disappeared. When the pale old man Ma saw this, he suddenly leapt away at great speed, wordlessly transforming into a streak of white light as he tore through the skies. Green-robed woman sneered at the sight of this and formed an incantation gesture with her hands before chasing after him in a breeze of wind. She no longer had any worry of Han Li, knowing that a divine sage was chasing after him. Additionally, this old cultivator wasn't capable of lightning movement, so he definitely wouldn't be able to escape her. As for the grand formation in the area, it was hardly effective against a nascent soul cultivator. Its restrictions were easily swept away. In an empty wilderness with a darkened sky, claps of thunder echoed through the air with flashes of silver light, each flash revealing the figure of a distraught Han Li. He was hurriedly glancing behind him with an expression of resentment. "Silvermoon, how many days have we fled?" Silvermoon's voice worriedly spoke in Han Li's mind. "It should be about 4 days already. If Master rests for more than a few minutes, this late nascent soul stage cultivator will immediately catch up. Is there truly no way to escape his spiritual sense mark? This is far too dangerous. Although you have the myriad-year spirit milk to restore your magic power, you've almost exhausted your divine devil-bane lightning. Without the lightning movement, you won't be able to escape his pursuit and movements. Such profound abilities are on par with instantaneous movement itself. There are hardly any differences to be said. Were it not for Master's shrewdness to completely avoid fighting and continuously flee, we would have been tangled down without a method of escape." And Li Riley smiled and resentfully said, "The trace of a late nascent soul stage spiritual sense can be tracked down by a couple hundred of kilometers. Although my own spiritual sense is beyond that of a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator, it is still quite lacking to a true late nascent soul stage cultivator. After all, I didn't learn the great development technique to completion. I haven't been able to get my hands on the last layers of the technique. Once this chase ends, I'll immediately head to the far west and find the final layers of that chant with certainty. In the past, I've never had this problem because my spiritual sense was always superior to my opponent's. But now, my hands are tied and I find myself helpless in spite of whatever methods I use. Silvermoon worriedly muttered, "Then how about Master Yu's bloodshadow evasion? In a single use, he'll be able to traverse over 50 kilometers. Surely you'll be able to break free of his spiritual sense tracking." Although Silvermoon hadn't mentioned anything about Han Li saving her life, she was touched by it nonetheless, causing her tone to feel particularly concerned. Having already considered the matter, he wryly smiled and said, "A single time won't be enough. I'll have to use the bloodshadow evasion at least 2 times in succession, perhaps even 3, and exhaust all my remaining divine Devilbane lightning for a good chance at escaping. Although my magic power is slightly greater than ordinary early nascent soul stage cultivators, it is still quite dangerous. Even if I come out unscathed, I will be weakened for quite a long while. Now that no other methods will work, this is the only option left." "Master Yu." Han Li's expression suddenly changed and he turned his head behind him. He gloomily snorted. "That person is grower closer to the second. I can no longer continue like this. I can only take the risk." When Silvermoon heard this, she chose to keep silent. Soon after, Han Li deeply sighed, and his hands quickly blurred as they formed a series of strange hand incantations. At that same moment, his body began to pulse with azure light, and an astonishing spiritual pressure suddenly released from his body. He then spat a mist of scarlet blood essence from his mouth. It scattered in the air and seeped into the azure light surrounding his body, transforming it into a demonic fusion of crimson and azure light. Soon, Han Li's hands and face became dark red, and countless threads of crimson blood began to spurt from all over his skin, making for a frightful sight. Han Li didn't seem to mind this in the least and continued forming hand incantations at great speed. Spitting out another 2 mouthfuls of blood essence, Han Li became completely enveloped in a mist of blood and could hardly be seen. At that moment, radiance began to shine from the distant sky. 3 silver balls of light were slowly moving towards them. Silhouettes could be seen moving from within them. They were Divine Sage Zhang and his 2 incarnations. Their scholar robes fluttered as they calmly flew in Han Li's direction. However, they moved at an incredible speed in spite of their appearances. In an instant, they had already traversed a distance of over 400 meters and could see Han Li from the naked eye. "Yi," one of the men wore a surprised expression, but he soon frowned. The azure crimson blood mist suddenly bursted with dazzling crimson light. As Han Li stood in place, he coldly glanced at the incoming Mulan Divine Sage before unfolding the thunderstorm wings behind his back. In the following moment, space itself warped around him, and Han Li's figure blurred from sight. A sharp ear-piercing shriek faded into the distance as suddenly as it had appeared. The 3 scholarly men simultaneously wore a face of astonishment, and the 3 glanced at one another before joining together with the man at the center. With a flash of silver light, the 3 men then returned into one. He immediately shut his eyes and released his spiritual sense in the direction that shriek had traveled in. The scholarly man glanced where Han Li had disappeared and revealed a trace of surprise. "What kind of movement technique can travel 50 kilometers in an instant? It seems similar to the Devil Dao's blood movement, but the distance is astonishing." Having chased Han Li for several days, the Divine Sage had experienced quite a bit of surprise at having continuously pursued him for several days without rest. Even if an early nascent soul cultivator was capable of lightning movement, their magic power should have long been exhausted, leaving them helpless to their fates, unless one possessed a heavenly treasure capable of instantly restoring one's magic power, or a secret technique that drained from one's vitality. Now that Han Li employed a strange movement technique, it appeared he hadn't shown his full strength before this. But this was no matter. Although he had already traveled 50 kilometers, Divine Sage Zhang was still tracking him with his spiritual sense. It would only be some more time before he caught up. Just as the scholarly man threw this, he narrowed his eyes, and his spiritual sense targeted Han Li once more. With a cold smirk, his body glowed with white light before setting off once more to give chase. But at that moment, the scholarly man suddenly felt Han Li's aura mysteriously disappear once more. He ceased his movements in shock. He suddenly thought of something and hastily expanded the perimeter of his spiritual sense by 2-fold before spotting Han Li once more. Yet before he could set off once more, Han Li's aura disappeared yet again. This time, the scholarly man simply stood in place with a face of amazement. Although his spiritual sense was vastly powerful, it could only reach a distance of a little over 100 kilometers. He could forcibly stretch his spiritual sense to acquire an approximate understanding of the environment, but it was beyond him to track someone at that distance. Of course, unless something impossible occurred, like Han Li waiting in place for him to sweep his spiritual sense past him. Han Li was a truly cunning opponent. The moment he felt the divine sage's spiritual sense speed past him, he employed that strange movement technique several times in succession and slipped away. This was perhaps the first time in many years since the scholarly man had ever been played around with in this manner. He was a magnificent Mulan divine sage. Once it became known that an early nascent soul cultivator was able to escape him, his reputation would be greatly tarnished. However, he didn't have any intention to immediately continue the chase. Without any spiritual sense tracking along with Han Li's strange techniques, it would be difficult to track Han Li down again, even with the use of secret techniques. Not to mention that he had already wasted several days chasing Han Li down. He couldn't continue the pursuit, especially given the uncertainty of success. After all, since he, a divine sage, had made an appearance, the other late nascent soul stage cultivators in the heavenly south could no longer remain idle. He needed to return and join with the other Mulan divine sages in preparation. If they were jointly attacked by enemy late nascent soul stage cultivators, it would be extremely dangerous. After pondering for a long while with a restless state of mind, his face grew sullen and he flew back in the direction from where he came. In the blink of silver light, he disappeared from sight. In an area 150 kilometers away, Han Li was flying through the sky in a streak of azure light in a different direction from before. He was continuously taking out medicine bottles from all over his body and pouring whatever vitality healing medicine he had down his throat. His complexion was deathly pale and his eyes were listless. Silvermoon's voice echoed through Han Li's mind. "Master, are you all right?" Using the bloodshadow evasion 3 times in succession was truly dangerous. Were it not for the many medicine pills Master had taken along the way, the third use of the technique would have. "It's nothing. Although I've lost much blood essence, fortunately, I refined a few medicine pills in the past. So long as I consume them and properly rest for a few months, my cultivation should be fully restored," Han Li slowly replied with an exhausted voice. Having heard this, Silvermoon sighed and hesitantly asked, "Will you be returning to Soaring Skies City?" The tone of helplessness, Han Li said, "Of course not. With a situation this dire, I must at least restore my cultivation before heading back to the 9 Nations Union. Otherwise, the Ghost Spirit Sect and whatever other enemies I have will be able to easily plot against me. I cannot brave such risks. Fortunately, I don't need to seek out an area with spirit veins, given the efficacy of the medicine pills alone. I simply need to find an uninhabited area and rest for a while." Furthermore, the bamboo cloudswarm swords are still tainted by the azure lantern flames. Although I've used the purple apex flames to forcibly restrain them, I must think of a method to remove the azure flames entirely, or there will be later consequences. Silvermoon smiled and said, "That bronze lantern was a lineage treasure belonging to the Mulan tribes, so it should have some closeness to the Ghost Dao. This servant is confident that so long as Master spends some time, he will be able to refine those flames entirely. Regardless of what is said, the purple apex flames possess truly remarkable abilities." Han Li bitterly smiled and calmly replied, "With how things played out, these problems can only be solved slowly in the end." Afterwards, Han Li spoke no more and used the remaining spiritual power in his body to urge the light around him to fly faster. After flying for a day, Han Li ceased his flight and dropped down to an unremarkable valley. The Mulan divine sage should be unwilling to search this far away. He glanced around several times and found 2 suitable barren hills. Not only were they completely lacking any spiritual power, but they were also completely bare and inseparable from the other hills in the area. Han Li cautiously swept his spiritual sense past a 50-kilometer radius. Finding that there were no cultivators or spell warriors nearby, he felt safe and released Silvermoon. The small silver fox then obeyed Han Li's orders without any objections and twirled around, sweeping a yellow light around her and enveloping Han Li within it. In a flash of light, she brought Han Li directly with her into the side of the hill. The valley became desolate once more. With Han Li brought to the center of the mountain through Silvermoon's earth movement technique, Azure Sword Chi was shot out in a dense barrage, quickly carving out a crude, 10-meter-wide room. In a blur, Han Li entered it and promptly sat down cross-legged. Not long after, Han Li opened his eyes and azure light began to revolve around him. Over 10 medicine bottles of various sizes laid before him. He needed to first refine the medicine pills he had taken before he dared to take any more medicine. As such, he calmly secluded himself as he restored his vitality. However, Han Li didn't anticipate that the damage to his vitality would be far greater than he had predicted. the amount of time he would need to recover would be much longer. As time dryly passed by, he meditated and focused on recovering with the aid of medicine pills. After around half a year slowly passing by, Han Li still remained within the center of the mountain. However, countless changes began to surge around the world. A battle to the death between cultivators and spell warriors was just off the horizon. And beyond Han Li's knowledge, his fame as the Drifting Cloud Sect's elder Han had spread widely, not only throughout the cultivators of the Heavenly South, but also through the ranks of the spell warriors. Whenever they heard of his name, none dared to hold him in contempt. His repute of matching a mid-nascent soul-stage cultivator was already well known. Ever since the battle at the Yellow Dragon Mountains, the three Mulan sages had taken the initiative to lead the war effort. In only half a month, they had already managed to push all the way towards Soaring Heaven City. Caught unprepared, the Nine Nations Union could only stand alone against the incoming enemies. Fortunately, the Grand Elder of the Nine Nations Union, Wei Wuya, one of the three great cultivators in the Heavenly South, had recently received word to hurry to the city. Relying on the city's grand formation, he was able to support it for an entire month against the spell warriors' armies. However, the city faced the combined might of 3 divine sages, a few black-robed cultivators, and 8 giant beasts. As such, it didn't take long for the grand formation to be destroyed, and for Soaring Heaven City to fall to the hands of spell warriors. But fortunately for the Nine Nations Union, a majority of their forces in the city had already withdrew to the neighboring countries of Yu and Bailiang. At that time, reinforcements from the Righteous and Devil Dao, as well as those from the Heavenly Dao Alliance, had arrived. With the 4 united superpowers of the Heavenly South, they managed to temporarily hold back the Mulan vanguard after a few small-scale battles. However, it was clear that none of these battles were a true battle to the death. Once Soaring Heaven City was seized by the Mulan, it immediately became the first stronghold in the Heavenly South for the spell warriors. An unending stream of Mulan spell warriors began to stream in from the Mulan plains in great number. Each of the Mulan tribes sent their elite to the other tribes in hopes they would be able to occupy the Heavenly South, apart from the greatest Mulan tribe, the Golden Sun tribe, who were occupied with monitoring the movements of the soaring tribes in the Mulan plains. Once the Mulan finished gathering together, they would begin conducting battles to the death. Of course, the Heavenly South wasn't about to accept this occupation without resistance. In addition to the forces of the 4 superpowers, unaffiliated sects also sent men, and even a few vagrant cultivators participated in the war effort, all knowing just how important the coming battle was. Even the various clans in the Heavenly South took the initiative to send their own forces to support the war. With these forces taking in, the 4 superpowers immediately moved towards the border of the state of Bailiang and the state of Yu. Through the use of grand techniques, they were able to construct a huge stone city overnight, treating it as a fortress to resist the spell warriors' advance. During that time, they also made arrangements for the various sect and vagrant cultivators in their armies, so that they may drive away the Mulan from the Heavenly South in a single move. Like the calm before the storm, battles between both sides ceased, and they made use of this opportunity for further preparations. And during this time, Han Li's feats during his time at the Yellow Dragon Mountains had already begun to spread. Of course, he couldn't have known that in addition to himself, Old Man Ma had also survived from the battle that day. However, in the face of the green-robed woman's wind movement techniques, he could only abandon his mortal body and flee back to the Nine Nations Union only with his nascent soul. As for core formation cultivators, Yingning and the Murong brothers had both survived. Once they saw the battle was lost, they all took the initiative to flee. With these survivors, Han Li's feat of killing the black-robed nascent soul cultivator in an instant became known by others, and his reputation soared. As for the controlling spirit sect spy, Gu Xiongpu, his true identity was only known by a select few high-grade cultivators amongst the superpowers. It was not widely spread. Of course, what truly made Han Li's reputation soar was the news that he managed to escape from the grasp of a Mulan divine sage. When divine sage Zhang had returned to the spell warrior army, his failure to kill Han Li had caused quite a commotion amongst the spell warriors. The scholarly man, as a result, had given Han Li a very high assessment in order to save face and avoid embarrassment, rating his abilities slightly beyond that of a mid-nascent soul-stage cultivator. Naturally, none doubted the assessment of a divine sage. With the addition of the many abilities Han Li displayed in his battle with the green-robed woman surnamed La, and his earlier victory over the Heavenly Wind tribe's Sage Mew, resulting in the destruction of his physical body. His repute amongst the spell warrior armies were even greater than those of the Heavenly South cultivators. Of course, this information eventually made its way to the Heavenly South, and had caused quite a ruckus as well. Needless to say, many other obscure nascent soul cultivators had also made a name for themselves in that way. After all, a cultivator's true abilities could only be truly measured in battle. Eventually, over half a year had passed, and Han Li had finally emerged from his seclusion in a valley in the state of Yu. Feng Chuo was a foundation establishment stage spell warrior from a small Mulan tribe. Although he was worshipped as an immortal master amongst his people, he was now merely a common foot soldier in Soaring Heaven City. He was currently stationed on a fortress on the border of the state of Bailiang. He had to patrol an area of over 100 kilometers with a party of Qi condensation spell warriors in between the fortress and the city to warn of any sudden attacks by the Heavenly South cultivators. After patrolling for about half a day, it was about time for him to be relieved by another spell warrior. Once he patrolled a few tens more kilometers, he would be able to return. Feng Chuo pondered for a moment, thinking about the tens of spirit stones he had received in the past 2 days. With those spirit stones, he felt confident he would be able to break through the bottleneck to mid-foundation establishment stage. He couldn't help but feel an impatience to return to cultivating and become stronger before the next battle. If he would be able to acquire a few merits in the upcoming battle, he would surely be rewarded with an appropriate number of spirit stones. This spell warrior was indulging in fantasy as he slowly flew on his magic tool, guiding a party of Qi condensation stage spell warriors. At that moment, he happened to fly across an ordinary cliff that few ever visited. When he thought to brush through the area, he suddenly saw a flash of azure light emerge from the rock, revealing an azure-robed youth that appeared to be in his early 20s. The youth glanced at the party of spell warriors with a cold, emotionless expression. When Feng Chuo clearly saw this youth, he swept his spiritual sense past him and felt his breath turn cold. Heavenly South cultivator, he's at least core formation stage. I cannot see the depth of his cultivation. Quickly withdraw, this person isn't someone we can handle. Feng Chuo acted rather keenly and hastily called for his 6 low-grade party members to retreat. He then tossed an exquisite spirit beast pouch through the air. At that same moment, a streak of red light shot out of the pouch and spun in the air before shooting in the direction of the fortress. At that moment, a beautiful white-clothed woman appeared in a flash of white light. Red light suddenly appeared near her, and she chuckled before spitting out a fragrant pink mist and forming a barrier around the streak of red light. With a clear cry, the red light faded away to reveal a small red bird floating in the air. The young woman extended her hand and had the small bird fly into it. Having seen this, Feng Chuo felt his heart drop. Unable to look after the others, he quickly formed a hand incantation and had his body glow with yellow light and instantly shot several kilometers away by using a life-saving technique. But at that moment, the youth narrowed his eyes and snorted. The sound was ordinary as it could be, but when Feng Chuo heard this, he felt his ears ring and his mind grow dark as he felt the very earth twirl around him. The other Qi condensation stage cultivators didn't fare any better either. In the instant the youth infused magic power with his snort, the spell warriors dropped to the ground in succession. As for Feng Chuo, the young woman arrived by his side in a blur and lifted him into the air by his neck. Once she landed in front of him, she sweetly smiled at the youth and said, "Master, this person is their leader. He should know a bit more." Needless to say, these two were Han Li and Silvermoon, who had discovered that the state of Yu had fallen during their time in seclusion. They already had a rough understanding of what had happened. He already had Silvermoon sneak into the nearby area and gather some information. Just as he was passing through this area, he discovered Feng Chuo's party patrolling nearby. Han Li felt his heart stir and decided to capture the party of spell warriors, questioning them about the surrounding affairs and saving him the hassle of treading into any areas that may be guarded by a divine sage. Combined with Silvermoon's bewitchment techniques, Han Li's Dreamtear technique allowed him to easily acquire what he wanted. Han Li greatly sighed with relief. The 3 divine sages took alternative turns guarding the border, but this span of the border was far from the fortress the divine sage was guarding, and was being guarded by only a Mulan sage. With Han Li's cultivation, he should have no problem sneaking past him. Han Li then looked down at the captives with a frown. In order to acquire the information as quickly as possible, Han Li had used a forceful method to extract information, resulting in a near-total annihilation of their minds. Even if they woke up, they would empty husks. With a light sigh, he turned each of the spell warriors into ash with a fireball. He then took to the skies in an azure streak of light and took Silvermoon in tow. On the border of the state of Bailiang, in a remote building in the newly constructed city of Skyfirst, Han Li's senior martial brother Lu was currently talking with a few other high-grade cultivators of the Heavenly South cultivators. However, he appeared absent-minded as if he were worrying about something. Since he had already battled against the spell warrior vanguard, he could already return to the Drifting Cloud sect. However, the sect currently only had 2 nascent soul cultivators. He couldn't allow the silver-haired old man, his senior martial brother, to lead the Drifting Cloud sect disciples into battle, so he took the initiative to remain and look after his sect disciples. Of course, the other reason he was unwilling to depart was because of the recently famous Drifting Cloud sect's elder Han. His whereabouts were still unknown. He was worried that Han Li either met mishap or perhaps found himself incapable of returning. Nevertheless, Han Li had already proven himself capable of killing other nascent soul cultivators, and even escaping the pursuit of a Mulan divine sage. Elder Lu could hardly believe Han Li was such a capable individual. After all, others might not know this, but he personally knew that Han Li had just condensed a nascent soul several years ago. How was it possible that he had developed such heaven-defying abilities in such a short amount of time? Even a Mulan divine sage had appraised him to be a level slightly above that of a mid-nascent soul cultivator. Could it be that the Drifting Cloud sect had truly collected a treasure? Was junior martial brother Han a cultivation genius that appeared once in 10,000 years? As of current, Lu Luo was sitting in the hall as he pondered about this matter, oblivious to what the others were saying. A white-haired old man sitting across from Lu Luo politely asked, "Brother Lu, did you receive any information about Elder Han?" He was an early nascent soul cultivator by the name of Su Changing, an elder of the Heaven Dao Alliance's Water Mirage sect, and a long-time acquaintance of Lu Luo. He had arrived at Skyfirst City the day before. After a moment of pause, Lu Luo smiled and answered, "There is no news for the time being, but it seems that Brother Su is showing quite a bit of interest in Brother Han." Su Changing chuckled. "It is only natural. From your tone, it seems that others have also asked the same. This should come as no surprise. Before I arrived at Skyfirst City, I've already heard many rumors with regard to fellow Taoist Han. An early nascent soul cultivator was actually able to escape a Mulan divine sage's pursuit. This isn't something that the likes of us are capable of. Furthermore, I've also heard that fellow Taoist Han had condensed a nascent soul only a few years ago. If that was true, then it'd be all the more shocking." As the old man spoke, the other cultivators nearby glanced at each other and turned their curious eyes towards Lu Luo. They were all interested in whatever rumors related to Han Li, not to mention the hearsay that Han Li was only a newly ascended nascent soul cultivator. That was something they had yet to hear anyone confirm. "That?" Lu Luo hesitated for a moment. Then, having recalled that this was a fact already known to quite a few people, he honestly replied, "It is true. Junior martial brother Han is a newly ascended nascent soul cultivator." The entire hall began to stir. There were even a few people that gasped in surprise. Amazed, Su Changing spoke with even greater admiration. "Since Elder Han possesses vast abilities at such a young age, surely he has a great chance to later rise to late nascent soul stage. I must congratulate Brother Lu. The Drifting Cloud sect will soon experience an era of prosperity, and in the future, a great cultivator will be joining the ranks of our Heavenly Dao Alliance." The others felt mostly the same and began to speak words of praise. Lu Luo felt somewhat pleased by this, but he uttered some humble remarks nonetheless. A middle-aged man with thick, straight eyebrows frowned and said, "But Brother Lu, although Elder Han managed to escape the hands of a divine sage, I fear that his injuries must be severe. Why else hasn't he appeared until now? Brother Lu should probably send some men to find him. If you are lacking hands, I am able to send some of my sect disciples to assist you." His tone of voice seemed emotionless. Lu Luo couldn't help but grow tense upon hearing those words, but he soon calmly replied, "I am not too sure about his circumstances, but I am sure that he is merely recovering from his injuries in concealment." As someone who lived for several hundred years, Lu Luo was able to clearly see the middle-aged man's envy. He was an elder of the #1 sect in the Heavenly Dao Alliance, the Phoenix's Cry sect. They were the sect that had the Dao companion cultivators that were capable of rivaling the 3 great cultivators of the Heavenly South. There were few other reasons why they stood at the top of the alliance. Now that he heard that a drifting cloud sect would later be able to enter late nascent soul stage, his mood turned for the worse. But from his expression, it appeared as if he were actually concerned, so none could say much about it. Just as the atmosphere turned awkward, a streak of red light suddenly entered the room, much to the surprise of those present. It circled once around before flying towards Luluo. With a face full of surprise, Luluo waved at the red light, and it burst into a ball of flames before dropping into his hand. After he immersed his spiritual sense into it, delight appeared on his face. Junior Marshal Brother Han entered the city. He is currently at my sect's camp. I must take my leave. Forcefully suppressing his excitement, he gave a brief explanation before hurriedly departing. The others were left dumbstruck for a time after seeing him leave in a blur, each of them wearing all sorts of expressions. They didn't expect that the legendary Elder Han would appear now. Su Changjing twirled his beard as he wore a pensive expression. As for the middle-aged man, he appeared calm, but if one looked closely, one could spot a trace of gloominess from his face. Although Skyfirst City was a newly constructed city, it was where the various sects of the four superpowers stationed their forces, each faction taking up a different section of the city. As for the middle section of the city, it was public grounds where a few famous vagrant cultivators lived. The Heavenly Tao Alliance were situated in the west section of the city, with the Drifting Cloud Sect occupying an area of about 5 acres in the southmost portion. Over 200 Drifting Cloud Sect disciples occupied it, consisting of 7 core formation cultivators, and the rest being at foundation establishment stage, a majority of the Drifting Cloud Sect's forces. Han Li was currently sitting in a wooden chair at the center of the main hall in the Drifting Cloud Sect's camp. He was holding his chin in hand as he wore a calm expression. At his side stood 2 core formation cultivators, the Fire Cloud Mountain Lord, a red-clothed old man, and the White Phoenix Mountain Lord, the woman surnamed Song. They were both waiting at his side in a solemn and respectful manner, but complicated expressions occasionally surfaced from their faces. At that moment, Luluo hurriedly rushed into the hall and spotted Han Li. He promptly beamed with joy as he approached him. "Junior Marshal Brother Han, you've finally returned. It's been over half a year since I've seen you. You've had me worried." Han Li stood up and returned the smile. "Sorry to worry you, but my vitality was injured at the time. I had no choice but to recover for a time. However, I heard news that Soaring Heaven City is no longer under our control. I was quite worried for you as well. It is good that nothing bad has happened." Luluo wore a relieved expression, but he then swept his gaze across the hall and his expression grew sullen. "Huh, where are the other martial nephews? Why haven't they greeted you?" The red-clothed old man respectfully answered, "Reporting to Martial Uncle, the others are on rotation today." Luluo's expression then relaxed. "Oh, so it was like that, then it can't be helped." At that moment Han Li said with a smile, "When I returned, I discovered that I had become quite famous. Could you tell me something about the rumors? There seemed to be many of them." On his return, he was quite surprised to hear many of the rumors about him. Luluo chuckled. "I was just thinking of talking to you about this." As he was about to continue, he suddenly glanced at the red-clothed old man and the woman standing at the side. "You two may leave. I'm going to have a discussion with your martial uncle Han alone." The two didn't dare to disobey and they hastily withdrew. However, when the woman surnamed Song walked out, she glanced once more at Han Li before departing. Han Li felt somewhat puzzled by this, but he turned a blind eye to this. Ever since the woman surnamed Song saw him, her expression had been odd, as if she had something she wanted to say to him. However, she was always hesitant to do so. While this did baffle Han Li, he had no intention to take the initiative to ask about it. Seeing that the 2 martial nephews had withdrawn, Luluo bitterly smiled and complained, "Junior Martial Brother, you've spent quite a bit of effort hiding your vast abilities from Senior Martial Brother Cheng and me. Why didn't you tell us about them earlier?" Han Li shook his head and helplessly said, "Senior Martial Brother Lu should know perfectly well that I condensed a nascent soul only a few years ago. Wouldn't I seem boastful speaking of any great abilities?" Luluo chuckled and wore a strange smile. "That's enough. There is no need for Junior Martial Brother to be so modest. Although it was our enemies who evaluated your abilities, their assessment should be too far off. Yet, what truly surprised my Senior Martial Brother and I was how you managed to steal away that female nascent soul cultivator from the Masked Moon Sect. You truly have our admiration." Han Li's expression stirred and he worriedly asked, "What? You've already seen Wanner?" Before Han Li and Nangong Wan departed, He had given her a jade slip, providing an ambiguous description of her identity. But when he heard Luluo, it seemed he already knew everything. Seeing the worry from Han Li's face, Luluo beamed and said, "That's right. Fairy Nangong already explained everything to Senior Marshal Brother Cheng. There is no need to worry about anything." Han Li frowned and puzzledly asked, "Senior Marshal Brother Lu means to say?" Luluo blinked before happily saying, "Ah, so Junior Marshal Brother still doesn't know. Several months ago, the masked moon sect suddenly spread information that Fairy Nangong had suffered inner demon backlash during cultivation and had lost her life, and that her engagement to the flowing mind sect's Wei Lycan was dissolved. Also, Senior Marshal Brother Cheng has recognized Wanner as his sworn sister and intends for the two of you to become Dao companions. What does Junior Marshal Brother Han think?" Han Li was dumbfounded by what he heard. Wanner has become a sworn sister of Senior Marshal Brother Cheng. "That's right, it is as I said. Once we repel the spell warriors, we will openly conduct the Dao ceremony for you too. Even if any doubts later surface, the matter will already be done. Who would dare to seek trouble from the entire Heavenly Dao Alliance? Even if Wei Wuya were to personally know of this matter, he would only be able to forcibly ignore the matter as we were war allies. Besides, you've also made quite the name for yourself. The Flowing Mind Sect and the Masked Moon Sect will likely ignore this matter." Having heard this, Han Li grew silent and a complicated expression appeared on his face. Then with a light sigh he slowly said, "For my matters, I have troubled my two senior martial brothers greatly. I will take it to heart." Han Li's simple words were much to the delight of Luluo. He and his senior martial brother had spent no small amount of effort to win over Han Li's feelings. With those words, it was most likely impossible for Han Li to be roped over to Yellow Maple Valley. A display of complete intimacy, Luluo continued, "He. We consider Junior Marshal Brother Han to be one of our own, not some outsider. Ah yes, Lady Nangong was somewhat worried when she heard you went missing and felt the need to rush here herself. It was only through immense effort that Senior Marshal Brother Cheng was able to hold her back. After all, there are May cultivators from the Flowing Mind Sect and the Masked Moon Sect here, and you've yet to officially become Dao companions. It'd be best if Fairy Nangong isn't recognized. As for Junior Marshal Brother Han's concubine, I've had her escorted back to the sect, as it will be dangerous in the upcoming battle." Han Li felt somewhat apprehensive at the thought of Mu Paling and Nangong Wan meeting each other. However, he merely uttered a few words of thanks to Luluo. "What does Junior Marshal Brother Han plan on doing now? According to the arrangements, you no longer need to participate in any upcoming battles due to your previous service. However, a few days ago, the Righteous and Devilish Dao, the Nine Nations Union, and our Heavenly Dao Alliance held a meeting with regards to war countermeasures, and Junior Marshal Brother Han was mentioned. Since you were able to slay the Black-Robed Spell Warrior in an instant, his techniques will be certainly capable of restraining the other Black-Robed Spell Warriors. As such, they hoped Junior Marshal Brother would be able to participate in the battle soon to come." Luluo then revealed a hesitant expression before continuing. "The representative of the Heavenly Dao Alliance also believes that Junior Marshal Brother will be a great military asset, and that it would be inexcusable if he doesn't fight. That is." Somewhat to Luluo's surprise, Han Li didn't reveal any anger. Instead, he coldly smiled and asked, "I find it acceptable to continue fighting. If the Heavenly South was to be truly occupied by the Mulan, nothing good would result of it for our Drifting Cloud sect. However, how will the previous agreement be dealt with? Surely it won't just be waved away with solely words." Luluo bitterly smiled and said, "Of course not. With the addition of Junior Marshal Brother's merits of slaying the black-robed cultivator and ferreting out the Mulan spy, the Alliance promises that it will adhere to any conditions Junior Marshal Brother will raise, given that he continues to fight in the war. So long as these conditions are fulfillable, they will attempt to satisfy you as much as they can as compensation." Han Li's expression stirred for a moment, but he remained calm. "They are willing to compensate me. That is easy to say, but I'll need to have a discussion about these specific conditions with the person in charge." Luluo smiled and said, "That is also good. I was just about to bring Junior Marshal Brother to go see the acting leaders of the Heavenly Dao Alliance. So long as your conditions aren't excessive, they should be willing to agree." Han Li smiled and slowly said, "Be at ease, Senior Marshal Brother Lu. I will not attempt to overreach myself and make it difficult for you." Seeing that Han Li understood to act within reason, he felt relieved and said, "Junior Marshal Brother must be joking. There is no need to give consideration for my sake. This is a rare display of generosity from those old folks. You shouldn't hold back." When Han Li heard this, he wore a mysterious smile and said nothing further. Afterwards, Luo promptly led Han Li out of the Drifting Cloud Sect's encampment and directly head to the Heavenly Tao Union's official hall. Our Heavenly Tao Alliance's acting leaders are a coalition of tensome elders from various large sects. They are replaced every interval of 10 years. Of course, this doesn't apply to the three founding sects of the Heavenly Tao Alliance, the Ancient Sword Sect, the Phoenix Cry Sect, and the Sailing Boundaries Study. In truth, these three sects have the most sway over the Alliance. And amongst them, the Phoenix Cry Sect is a cut above the Ancient Sword Sect and the Sailing Boundaries Study in terms of power. Surely you should know of fellow Taoists Feng Bing and Long Han of the Phoenix Cry Sect. They are Tao companions that are capable of contending against a late nascent soul cultivator. It is because of these two that we are capable of rivaling the other three factions. However, only fellow Taoist Long Han has revealed himself as Elder Feng Bing immediately entered seclusion upon arriving at Skyforce City. It appeared as if she was at a crucial period of cultivating some secret technique. So long as Junior Marshal Brother Han has a proper discussion with the acting leaders of the Alliance that are currently in the city, they should surely be agreeable. I also have to mention that Elder Long Han is currently amongst the three acting leaders in the city. As Luo walked by Han Li's side, he gave him an explanation of the workings of the Heavenly Tao sect. Some of this information was new to Han Li. As such, he simply nodded as he silently listened. The Heavenly Tao Alliance's official hall was located in the center of the west part of the city. In a calm walk, Han Li and Luo soon arrived there. It was an imposing stone hall that was surrounded by many towers. Clearly recognizing Luo, the Foundation establishment cultivators guarding the hall respectfully saluted him. One of them stepped forward, said, "Greetings, Senior Lu. Which elders have you come to see, and who might this senior be?" Their expressions grew hesitant when they saw Han Li's unfamiliar face. Luo's expression remained calm as he calmly said, "This is my fellow sect Elder Han, and I've come to see Elder Long and the others." "Ah, so it was Senior Han. Please wait a moment. The elders are currently discussing something in the hall. I will report to them immediately." The cultivator was shocked and glanced at Han Li with astonishment, his expression growing more respectful. It was clear he knew of Han Li's reputation. The cultivator soon took out a sound transmission talisman and whispered something into the talisman before tossing it into the air. A short moment after it shot inside as a streak of red light, 3 melodious rings rang from the hall. When the guards heard this, they immediately bowed. "Please enter, seniors. The elders already know that you've arrived." Luo nodded and boldly walked into the hall. Han Li calmly followed after him. After passing through several corridors, Luo brought Han Li into a side chamber where 6 nascent soul cultivators were currently seated. When the two walked in, all 6 of them glanced over. However, most of their gazes were focused on Han Li, each with an interested expression. Each of their cultivations was unordinary, but when Han Li looked at them, his attention was caught by the middle-aged man that was sitting in the center of the room. His clothes were gray, his appearance odd, and his stature wide. His cultivation was also at the peak of mid-nascent stage, a considerable distance above ordinary mid-nascent soul cultivators. He was just 1 step away from entering late-nascent soul stage. Han Li's heart trembled, immediately realizing that this person was the Phoenix Cry Sect's Long Han. With such profound cultivation, it was no wonder he was able to contend against late-nascent soul cultivators with his wife. He had originally believed the rumors were over-exaggerated, not the other way around. As the others remained silent, the middle-aged man beamed and stood up. With a salute, he said, "Brother Lu, this must be your sect's Elder Han. In the past few days, we've heard much of your thunderous repute." After giving the middle-aged man an appraising glance, Han Li returned the salute and smiled. "So you must be Long Han. I too have long heard of your famous name." Sitting at Long Han's side, an old man with pale complexion half-jokingly said, "If we're speaking of reputation, recently fellow Taoist Han is much more famous. You've given our Heavenly Tao Alliance much face. This fellow Taoist is quite humorous. May I know your name?" Han Li had already taken note of the old man as he was the only mid-nascent soul cultivator in the room apart from Long Han. He didn't dare to slight him. Before the old man could reply, Luo rushed to introduce him. "Junior Marshal Brother Han, this is Brother Quang of the Sailing Boundaries Study. His heavenly earth arts have repeatedly shaken the continent for several hundreds of years." Astonished, Han Li said, "So it turned out to be Brother Quang. I've also held you in much admiration for a long time." Han Li's words weren't lies. This old man was truly renowned, and was second in the Heavenly Dao Union only to Long Han and his Dao companion. Of course, the Drifting Cloud sect elder Cheng had repeatedly mentioned them in the past, but Han Li didn't think he would actually meet them. Afterwards, Lu Luo introduced the other cultivators to Han Li. They weren't particularly noteworthy apart from the ancient sword sect elder, an ugly man surnamed Tian, who Han Li particularly took notice of. With the introductions over, they all took a seat. Long Han smiled and calmly said, "Since fellow Taoist Han has come to visit the official hall, he should know of our wishes for him to continue fighting in the war. In truth, we did break our previous promise. But with war approaching, your abilities will prove to be of great strength for the cultivators of the Heavenly South. We have no other choice, but as compensation, we will provide you with materials, medicine pills, and such for your trouble. Fellow Taoist Han, if you are still unwilling, we can further discuss this. So long as it is possible for your alliance, we will not refuse you." Long Han deserved his title as the cultivator who ruled the Heavenly Dao Alliance. Before Han Li could even mention why he had come, he already took the initiative to apologize to Han Li. He would be put in a bad position if he were to reveal his objections. However, Han Li wasn't angry to begin with. Having escaped from the hands of the Mulan divine sage, he had proved he should have more than enough strength to spare to preserve his life when a battle turned for the worse. Since he had no worries over his survival, he didn't have much to be unhappy about. Rather, he felt that this was a rare opportunity. As a result, Han Li pondered for a moment before bluntly speaking, "Since Brother Long said this, I will not object to continuing to fight. After all, I do understand this war is for the survival of the Heavenly South. However, there are some things that I will require from the Heavenly Dao Alliance. Therefore, I will bluntly take advantage of this opportunity." When Han Li said this, he appeared calm. He knew that these old eccentrics were extremely sharp, and felt that it would be easier to handle such matters directly. As expected, his honest words left a positive impression on most of the cultivators in the room. The cultivator surnamed Quang was particularly happy, and he honestly replied, "Fellow Taoist Han's quick and direct words are very much to my liking. Please tell us of your conditions. I am quite curious." Long Han's expression wavered several times before he silently smiled. As for the others, they all glanced at Han Li, wondering what it was that he wanted. With an indifferent expression, Han Li calmly said, "It is quite simple. I hope to draw support from the Alliance to help me find a certain type of tool refinement material. I won't hide this from you. This item is extremely important to me. If you are able to gather together these items for me before the grand battle, I will have more confidence in dealing with those black-robed cultivators." Tool refinement material. Those in the room glanced at each other, none revealing surprise. They all knew of materials that were certainly precious and difficult to find. Why wouldn't Han Li want to use this opportunity to seek them out? Lu Luo wore a pensive expression upon hearing Han Li and faintly recalled something. Luo Han slowly asked, "What is this material? Please tell us, fellow Taoist Han." "I need auric essence to refine my magic treasure. The more, the better. But don't worry, I am willing to trade items of equal value for it. I will not take it for nothing. The Alliance only needs to use their resources to help me collect the auric essence, or perhaps find its whereabouts." Having been unable to acquire a large amount of auric essence and refine the aureate sword formation, Han Li felt extremely frustrated by the matter. Now that this opportunity presented himself, he wished to use it to its fullest extent. Auric essence. Those present all revealed unconcealable shock upon hearing Han Li. This illustrious treasure known as honed gold was about what they had expected, but they were stunned from hearing such a heaven-defying material nonetheless. Old man Quang frowned and wore a puzzled expression. "Fellow Taoist Han, the magic treasure you wish to temper requires such a vast amount of auric essence. Do you know how much a magic treasure's power increase after only infusing a small quantity of it? And if you add too much, it won't have any further effects." Han Li calmly said, "Don't worry, I already know this. I merely wish to ask whether your alliance would be able to gather together a certain quantity of this item." Long Han shook his head with a sigh. "Since fellow Taoist Han is willing to evenly trade for it, we can certainly be on the lookout for any information to help you gather together the material if we can. However, when such items are acquired, they are normally consumed immediately. From your tone, it seems you require much of it. I fear this will be quite difficult to do. Even if information of auric essence exists, their masters may keep quiet on account of wishing to acquire it themselves. It will be difficult to find. That is why only such a small amount was found at the recent trade meet. When Han Li heard this, his heart sank. He had already considered the problem, but he had no methods of dealing with them. He was at a complete loss over the matter. If he truly couldn't acquire a large amount of auric essence in the heavenly south, he may have to travel to the rumored Jin Empire or other great continents in his search. Since the Jin Empire was about 10 times larger than the heavenly south, perhaps he would be able to find a large amount of auric essence there. Not to mention that he still had the bone case he received in the Umbra realm that contained the refinement method for the spirit subjugation talisman. If he returned to the Jin Empire, he would naturally want to return it to the heavenly talisman sect. Han Li felt a wave of gloominess upon hearing this. Seeing Han Li's hesitant expression, Lu Luo couldn't help but console him. Junior martial brother Han, let's change the condition. Auric essence isn't something that can be easily sought. Han Li unconsciously frowned when he heard him. After a moment of thought, he shook his head and said, regardless, auric essence is extremely important to me. Even if the chances are slim, I still want the Alliance to agree to this matter. Once this was said, he wore a resolute expression. Seeing that Han Li made up his mind, Long Han eventually nodded. Since fellow Taoist Han decided, I will order the Alliance's disciples to spare no effort over this matter. However, please don't regret this decision if we aren't able to find even a single piece of auric essence. Despite the great superpower the Heavenly Tao Alliance may be, the most it could do was order its low-grade disciples around, and pay particular attention to any news that may surface. Since this matter wouldn't prove particularly draining, Old Man Quang and the others raised no objections. However, they also felt that this alone wasn't enough to compensate. They promptly took out a bag of over 100 mid-grade spirit stones as well. Han Li took it with a smile. With this resolved, a friendly atmosphere appeared in the hall. The Heavenly Tao Alliance cultivators chatted for the time being. Eventually, detailed questions about the battle at the Yellow Dragon Mountains were being asked, particularly about the black-robed man and the Mulan divine sage. With no intent to conceal this, Han Li answered their questions once through. Of course, he brushed past any mention of his techniques and treasures, and Long Han and the others didn't press him. However, they were doubtful when they heard that the black-robed man weren't heretical demon or ghost cultivators. Long Han was particularly surprised to hear that they were merely devil Tao cultivators. When a half-day had passed, Han Li and Lu Luo eventually took their leave. Shortly after they departed, a voice transmission talisman suddenly shot towards Lu Luo's hand. Lu Luo gave Han Li a helpless smile and said, I have urgent business to attend to. I'm afraid I can't continue to keep your company. Junior martial brother Han should take a stroll around the city. Let us have a proper chat when night comes. Han Li kindly smiled in response. Senior martial brother Lu, please don't mind me. I also wish to go take a look at the city alone. Feeling relieved, Lu Luo saluted Han Li and hastily flew off in a streak of light. The matter seemed truly important. As Han Li watched Lu Luo depart, he shook his head, but after some thought, he smiled instead. He pondered for a moment as he looked at the sky before heading towards the city's central district. But after taking a few steps, he stopped and slowly turned around to face Mountain Lord Song, who stood at the entrance of a nearby alley. She stood there with bit lips and a hesitant expression. Han Li blinked and waved at the woman. With a moment more of hesitation, she walked over with lithe steps. The beautiful woman respectfully shouted, Junior pays her respects to Martial Uncle Han. How long have you been waiting here? Han Li looked at the woman's face with hands behind his back. The woman lowered her head and softly replied, It has been about an hour already. Han Li glanced around and calmly said, It seems you have something you wish to say to me. However, this isn't a good place to talk. Follow me. Without waiting for her reply, he began walking. The woman's expression wavered for a moment before she closely followed after him. Once Han Li brought her to a secluded place, he turned around and said, What is it that you wish to say? The woman kept silent for a moment before taking out a jade slip from her robes and handing it over to Han Li. Someone had this martial niece pass on a letter to martial uncle. They wish to see you. A letter? Han Li wore a face of surprise and swept his spiritual sense past the item. However, he didn't immediately sink his spiritual sense into it. He stared at the woman and asked, Who gave this to you? You must know. With the jade slip no longer in her hands, she managed to retain her calm. It is a good friend of mine. She says that she knows you and wishes to pass something on to you. She knows me? Han Li narrowed his eyes and his expression stirred. After pondering with a tilted head, he eventually pressed the jade slip against his head and looked into it. A short moment later, he was wearing an odd expression on his face. "Where is she? Bring me to her." The woman blinked and astonishedly said, "Martial uncle truly recognizes my friend." Han Li casually said, "That's right, there is some friendship between us. I didn't think that martial niece Song would know her." Spirits roused, she sweetly smiled and said, "I met her in only the last 2 years. I originally believed it to be a joke that she knew you. I didn't think that it would be true. I've arranged an empty place for her outside of the city. I'll bring you to her." Afterwards, Han Li and the woman walked towards the city gate one by one. After they left Skyforce City, the woman took to the skies and led Han Li south. They traveled tens of kilometers before arriving at a small, uninhabited valley. The entrance of the valley was enveloped in a pure white mist, concealing its interior from sight. The woman surnamed Song silently waved her hand as she grabbed onto a command talisman. The streak of red light then shot into the mist and caused it to roll away and reveal a narrow green path. The woman respectfully stood to the side and said, "Martial uncle, please go first." With Han Li's current spiritual sense, he clearly saw everything within the valley. He wore a slight smile on his face and walked down the path. This exquisite valley wasn't large. It was only a mere 300 meters in an area with nothing aside from several small buildings at its center, making it appear only as a temporary residence. Yet, it was completely clean near the buildings with not a single weed to be found. However, someone in the room was alarmed by the formation being broken. In a blur, a gorgeous, yellow-robed woman emerged from the building.